And this woman about dropped her fork, the Catholic woman, and she said, "What are they doing here?" And our Adventist lady said, "Well, what do you mean by that? That's Elder Froome, you know, up in the General Conference." And she named the other man. And the woman said, no, they are not, they're Catholic priests.
What?
How about Paul from Cocoa? That works. Paul?
Yeah, how you doing?
I'm fine. What's your question, please?
I used to be a Seventh-day Adventist a long time ago.
All right, sir.
And what they taught back then was that the Pope was some kind of Antichrist back then. And I just have that's kind of a bigoted statement on top of that.
Well, you were one time an Adventist?
Right, I used to.
Basically, I think Ken Cox is here to represent what you might say is the Adventist point of view on the whole issue of this campaign. And Paul, I hear what you're saying. Do you have any thoughts for?
Well, I think that if he was taught that the Pope is the Antichrist, I think that would be a misunderstanding. I don't feel that's what we as a church believe.
Okay, Paul, I appreciate the call. Joe from Orlando. How you doing, Joe?
I'm doing fine. Thanks so much for your show this evening.
Well, thank you, ma'am. What's your question, please?
I have a question. If you had been a former Adventist and switched to another church, a full gospel church, does this gentleman feel then that you will not be saved and that you will die in damnation because you do not follow Saturday, which you thought at one time was the true Sabbath?
First place, to ask me the question puts me in a seat of judgment, and I can't judge. I'm not capable of doing that. So I can't say that. I'm just saying that if a person has accepted Jesus Christ as their personal Savior, given their heart to Him, and they're walking with the Lord by faith and following the Scripture as they understand it, then my understanding is they're going to be in God's kingdom.
But I had a wonderful view, and I saw some fascinating close-up views. We must rethink our approach to our Roman Catholic friends. How can we reject an outstretched hand, there it is again, and be Christians? The same thing Westbury said when he went to Andrews, right? Theological seminary. And then it says, how can we say they belong to Antichrist when they reveal many beautiful Christian attitudes? So is he changing his position?
Pope, Your Holiness, your historic visit to St. Louis, Missouri has served as a catalyst in the creation of this program, and it transforms your presence into a lasting legacy for our region. Today, we present to you this proclamation announcing the creation of Faith Beyond Walls. Your commitment to improving interfaith relations has fostered an environment wherein the spirit of collective faith, positively action, can thrive.
You'll be the head teacher in a two-teacher school. You'll have a parsonage right there on the campus. And we're just really excited. It's a beautiful area in Northern California. And you can have it on one condition. I said, okay, what's the condition? And the superintendent of education looked at me right square in the eyes and he said, Bill, you got to promise me something right here in this room. I said, what's that, Elder Hutchins? He said, you got to promise me you will not teach or preach in public the three angels' messages.
He was in constant communion with his Father. John 8:29. He every morning separated time to spend time with his Father and to get orders for the day. He said, everything I do whatever my Father tells me to do. That's what we are to do. And yet, today, the tendency is to obey man rather than God. Even within our own church, there is more a tendency today, and we graduate theology students today that learn how to obey their president. Pastors learn to obey their president, and presidents obey their presidents, and presidents obey their presidents. That is Catholicism. $30 million of our brothers and sisters were tortured and murdered during the Middle Ages by the Roman power. And we go and shake hands and hug the beast?
How have your conferences been received in the rest of the world, right?
Yep. Yes.
And what did he say?
He said,
we just had a conference in Florida
Yes.
with about 600 participants from all over the world. Precisely, the term was religious freedom.
Listen to
and
that.
The Pope and the hope of peaceful coexistence. There were Buddhists, Catholics, Adventists, Baptists, all kind of Christian personalities, and the goal was to speak together.
So let's preach everything we have to preach. Oh, but unless we've signed an agreement with Rome that we're not going to do it. Rome went and did all their homework last year and gathered all the church leaders everywhere and made them sign, not made them, requested that they sign a document saying we will all work together, we will not criticize each other, and definitely we will not fight on the opposite side from each other. Everybody signed. And now we have freedom to preach anything we want to preach. And guess what? We can't, because we've already agreed not to preach against them. For example, I happen to know of several union presidents that signed it. I happen to know that we have met with them. Our religious liberty director met with the Pope and the religious leaders. I did not see the video of them signing, but he went to the signing, they went to the meeting, and almost always, the Adventist is always placed at the end, so that after they greet all the other churches, the last event is the Seventh-day Adventist Church and Rome are now together. And that has happened, and you know what? Going to those events, I'm sorry, that's called spiritual adultery. Because when you spend time with the great whore, it's called an illegitimate relationship. And that's called adultery. And that's what we've been doing all over the world.
It was Neil Wilson, under oath, that said that our anti-popery position has been consigned to the historical trash heap. I'm afraid that Ted Wilson, it appears, is fulfilling the dreams of his father.
Absolutely, Danny. Absolutely.
Remember the words of Ted Wilson's father, ex-General Conference President Neil Wilson. Although it's true that there was a period of time in the church when the denomination took a distinctly anti-Roman Catholic viewpoint, which has now been assigned to the historical trash heap so far as Seventh-day Adventist Church is concerned. And I have here in this picture the great controversy going in the trash heap because it's been substituted with the great hoax.
So they paid this man who was on the Board of Education for the United States of America. His name was Dr. Raymond Moore. My aunt worked for him for years. I went to work for him when I was 18. On that board was Ted Wilson's father. He spent a lot of time with my aunt. and told her I'm a third degree Mason.
Well, if you were the devil and you knew that God had a people, and you knew that if God woke up the people, you are lost, what would you do? Where would you send your demons? To the world headquarters. Our world leaders are more under attack than any of us. Because if they pronounce the wrong thing, it keeps the people asleep. Rome is attacked there. My wife and I have personal experience. I won't mention what it is. Personal experience with the administration. Some of the administration telling us, the Jesuits aren't our enemies, they're our friends.
Because I challenge my Protestant pastor friends, if there is no more protest, how can there be a Protestant church? Brothers and sisters, Luther's protest is over. Is yours.
The Lord abhors indifference. Are you just enjoying life, coming to church, hearing a good sermon? How nice. We're in crisis. If you're middle of the road right now, God abhors that. He doesn't abhor you, He loves you. But the status of being in the middle of the road during a time of crisis makes Him indignant. His special blessing, God's special blessing, accompanies the labors of men of action. Men who will not be swerved from the straight line of duty, but with divine energy inquire, who is on the Lord's side? This is on page 236 of Christian Service. Who is on the Lord's side? Men who will not stop merely with the inquiry, but will demand that those who choose to identify themselves with the people of God, demand, Demand. That's a hard word. Demand that if you choose to identify yourself with the people of God, that you will step forward and reveal unmistakably your allegiance to the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. You claim to be an Adventist? Prove it. Don't bring out these credentials. I work for the conference. I want to see if you're an Adventist. I want to see if you're loyal to what we believe and teach. I want to see if you're loyal to the spirit of prophecy. I want to see if you're loyal to the mission of the church. Don't give me this loyalty to the Union Division and General Conference. We ought to be loyal. I need to be loyal to my wife. But if I'm more loyal to my wife than to God, that's called idolatry. If my wife should choose someday to leave, Lord, God forbid, I must still go on. And if some of my leaders go off to the side and become friends with the Vatican, I'm sorry, we part ways. You understand? It is time to choose sides.
As he worked there, of course, Ellen White was also in the Battle Creek area, and Dr. Kellogg, and we had a printing house there, a large church beside the college. Dr. Wilkinson spoke 8 different languages fluently. He was a brilliant man. And as the years went by, of course, they moved to Tacoma Park, where our work was moved to. He told us about the Battle Creek fires. And Ellen White had warned our publishing house that our publishing house was to print only Adventist literature. Mm-hmm. A fire broke out in the publishing house and burnt it to the ground. Ellen White, what later came out was that the night of the fire, the publishers had on their desk a book, a spiritualistic book that we were going to print.
You know, June, the book was actually Kellogg's The Living Temple that was teaching pantheism. You know, that God isn't a personal being, but a mysterious essence that pervades all nature. In other words, he's in the trees, he's in the water, he's in the plants, he's in human beings.
And that night, the Lord said, this is enough, and he burnt the place down. Burnt it down.
When I think of those judgments of God, you know, the first one actually was February 18th, 1902, which was the largest and the best-known Adventist institution, Battle Creek Sanitarium. The second one we know is the Review and Herald Publishing Association, December 30th, 1902, because of the fact that they were going to print The Living Temple by John Harvey Kellogg.
Wilkinson told us again that the firemen, when they would hear to call in Battle Creek, they would say, oh, we can't put them out. Those are Adventist fires. Wow. So they knew that there was something about those fires that could not be quenched until they burnt to the ground. He told us the story about John Harvey Kellogg. He said that presidents, congressmen, you know, people high up in Washington, D.C. came for healing. So you can see God working there to have the Adventists known in the center of our nation, okay? So, you know, Satan saw this, and we were told that the health work was the right arm of the message.
Amen.
So you can imagine Satan wanted to knock that out.
Oh, yes.
What happened was Dr. Wilkinson said he actually saw Kellogg sometimes out walking down the street with a handsome young man dressed totally in black. Kellogg never introduced this man to anyone.
Really?
Later, Ellen White was shown that the man who was walking with Kellogg was Satan himself. Dr. Wilkinson told us that Ellen White had said this, and I don't think she ever put that in print.
Really?
Ellen White may have never wrote about the man in black that was with Kellogg, but I do have statements from her. In fact, she wrote to the doctor, the specious, scheming representations of God and nature carry their charming, soothing influence as a peace and safety pill to give to the people in the spiritualistic views that Satan has instituted in your theories. So she did confirm that it was Satan himself that was influencing these pantheistic theories. So this Dr. Wilkinson, how was he received by his peers in the Adventist?
Well, at that time, I think everything was okay. Mm-hmm. He was brought to Tacoma Park, and he became president of our college there.
He did?
Yes, he did. And he was president of Washington Missionary College, which is now Columbia Union College. He was president of that for about 10 years. During that time, not only the presidency, but he taught all of the theology students, okay? Then men from the General Conference came to him and said, Ben, you are working too hard. We're going to relieve you of some of your duties. We will send a young man to teach your theology students, and that will take the burden off of you. So, okay, Ben went along with it, and this young man came and he began teaching our theology students. Well, it wasn't too long until some of the students who already had been taught by Wilkinson came to him and said, Dr. Wilkinson, there's something strange here. He doesn't seem to be teaching what we have always taught and what we believe. So it was very insidious, but some of these brighter young men were picking up that there was something wrong here. Well, Dr. Wilkinson did not walk in and confront this theologian. He just simply began watching the mail. Out in the hallway was kind of a pigeonhole, there was a pigeonhole where all of the mail of all the various teachers and everything was put in. So and the pigeonholes are open, they're not closed. So Wilkinson's watching this professor's mail, and one day this manila envelope comes in, and Wilkinson sees the return address coming from Georgetown University, and Wilkinson took that manila envelope into his office. He steamed it open, and he read its contents.
I believe it was the first Jesuit university in the United States.
That's right, it was.
This is where Bill Clinton went to school.
Yes, of course he was intrigued when he saw that address. When he opened it up, he found the instructions in there as to what this man was to teach the theology students for the next few weeks or the next month. So he was evidently getting monthly instructions as to what he was to teach.
He was a plant, a Jesuit plant.
But what has often roused my curiosity, who were the men in the General Conference who saw to this man getting in? And I will get to that a little later.
Okay.
Anyhow, Wilkinson called this man into his office, and he put the mail in front of him. He said, I know who you are, I know why you are here, and I know where you come from. He said within the hour, the young man was gone. Never saw him again.
You know, Ellen White says that Satan's chief works at the headquarters of our faith. That's a powerful statement. Now, why wouldn't the enemy target our colleges, our theological departments, Battle Creek, all of these institutions?
Absolutely. Not only had to knock out our health work, but now he had to work, knock out the rest of our beliefs.
Powerful.
But anyhow, moving on to Leroy Froome.
Yeah, this was some of the most interesting information you shared with me, because as you share this, I'll tell a little bit how God also led me to expose some of Rome's agents in our denomination.
Right. Well, Leroy Froome hated Dr. Wilkinson, and he would call Dr. Wilkinson up on his birthday every year, and he would say, Ben, are you still alive? He just hated him so much he was waiting for the man to die. Dr. Wilkinson told us who the early Catholic fathers were and how they destroyed, truth. And so we knew the names of these Catholic fathers. Well, in Tacoma Park, a little while later, Dr. Froome held an evangelistic series, if you can call it that, but it was Faith of Our Fathers or something like that. We went to about 2 meetings and we couldn't take it anymore. Every one of the fathers that he listed as being the forefathers of the Adventist Church or of Protestantism were all the Roman Catholic fathers that Wilkinson had told us about. So at that point, the next time I saw Dr. Wilkinson, I said, Dr. Wilkinson, is Elder Froome a Jesuit?
Wow.
Dr. Wilkinson wouldn't answer it, but I could see from the look on his face that there were big questions because of the way this man had fought him. And we also had the book Questions on Doctrine.
That's what I want to talk about here.
Questions on Doctrine written, and there were 3 men. Dr. Wilkinson, one day we came to his house and he was pacing up and down and he had a manuscript in his hand. And he said, this is a book they're getting ready to print. He said, this book is pointing a dagger at the Adventist heart.
That presented us more in favor to the evangelical world.
That's right.
That we didn't look as peculiar now on the nature of Christ and other pivotal doctrines of the Adventist Church.
That's right. So Wilkinson was very upset about that, but there was nothing he could do about it. There were 3 authors of that book, and Wilkinson said, look at this. He said, they're not even listing the authors. They don't even want anyone to know who the men were that were behind the writing of this book. One of them was Froome.
And the other two, June, were Walter E. Reed and Roy Allen Anderson.
All three of these men were the most prominent up in the General Conference.
Really?
Yes.
I don't see Leroy Froome's name in here. I have a copy of Questions on Doctrines, and it was published in 1957. But inside the book, it says that it was prepared by a representative group of Seventh-day Adventist leaders, Bible teachers, and editors.
These were the things that were going on in Tacoma Park while we were there.
Wickedness in high places.
Wickedness in high places. 30 years later, we were living up in Oregon at the time, and at a church potluck, we met a lady that was just there for the day. She was an Adventist lady. I don't know if she was visiting relatives or what she was doing. But in the conversation, I found out that she had lived at Tacoma Park for a while. And I found out the years and everything, and somehow in the conversation, she told us a story. And she said that she had a Catholic friend, a good Catholic friend. And one day she said to her, I want to introduce you to vegetarian diet. So she took her to the sanitarium hospital where we had a lovely, dining room, and many visitors would come in. And so she took her there, and they were eating their food, and in walked Elder Froome and another General Conference man with him. And this woman about dropped her fork, the Catholic woman, and she said, what are they doing here? And our Adventist lady said, well, what do you mean by that? That's Elder Froome, up in the General Conference. And she named the other man. And the woman said, no, they are not, they're Catholic priests.
What?
And our friend, our Adventist lady says, what do you mean? They're Adventist ministers. This woman said, no. She says, I've been at Mass when they were performing Mass. I've been in Catholic churches where these men were performing Mass.
I've heard that story from another person who said that the man who was walking with Leroy Froome that day, that the woman identified they were Catholic priests, was the other author of Questions on Doctrine, Roy Allen Anderson.
So this lady passed this on to me. I wish now I had gotten her name and her address.
Questions on Doctrines comes out now and just caused a big uproar within Adventism,
yes,
because this was softening, changing, altering our historical stance or position on theology.
That's right.
And it came in and it started causing a division on the nature of Christ.
Yes.
So they were causing turmoil within the Adventist church, getting people to question what we once taught. And then this question on doctrines, kind of to the evangelical world, we didn't look as bad anymore. And this woman recognized Leroy Froome as a Catholic priest.
Yeah, she said she had been to Mass in his churches.
But it makes sense, because who would be behind Questions on Doctrine?
And what is so sad is that Leroy Froome's name to this date comes up in our writings. He's revered, he's respected. They still think of him as the greatest. And he actually wrote a book to counteract Dr. Wilkinson's book on Truth Triumphant. Yeah, on our fathers, While in Tacoma Park, it seemed like just my husband and I would visit Dr. Wilkinson. And we asked him once, why aren't the theology students coming to you? And he said, because they have been warned away from me, that I'm a quack, that there's something wrong with, I don't know what they told him. But the thing was, we then got curious and we started talking to theology students, and they would all say, oh, B.G. Wilkinson, we will have nothing to do with that old quack, And so they made sure that our theology students were so poisoned against him that they wouldn't go near him. Isn't that something?
Yes, and who are they? They warned.
Well, we don't know.
But they were the leaders in the Adventist.
The leaders up in the General Conference, those who taught the theology students.
A few years ago, I was concerned that there was a Jesuit infiltrator in the Adventist church, and maybe some of you have read my book, The Final Inquisition, where I exposed Dr. Samuel Bakioki.
Yes.
Because of my concerns in looking at his books and his material, that they were endorsed by the Lord's Day Alliance, you know, that promotes Sunday, you know, as the Lord's Day. They were endorsed by the Society of Jesus, SJ, which was the Jesuits. When you look at what he was teaching in the end, changing and altering our prophecies, you know, 538 to 1798, taking the eyes off Rome onto the Muslims. And here he's bringing all this stuff in, and he gets he went to the Gregoriana. The Gregoriana Jesuit school in Rome, Italy, and he's recognized and honored by the Pope for his work, for his book From Sabbath to Sunday, which I stayed up all night, like Wilkinson, preparing for them to come against Truth Triumphant. I stayed up all night reading From Sabbath to Sunday, and I confronted Dr. Bakioki personally in the Galt Seventh-day Adventist Church. And I told him I'd been up all night from all night long reading his book From Sabbath to Sunday, and I found nowhere that when you referred to Revelation 1:10, I was in the Spirit on the Lord's Day. I don't see where you're referring to this Lord's Day as the Sabbath. And the church went silent, and there were 200 people there. And he said, "Very good observation, young man. It doesn't."
They have become so bold now that they don't even mind telling you.
I exposed them in my newsletter, The Elijah Prophecy, that you can sign up free and get at modernmanna.org, The Elijah Prophecy. I exposed him as a Jesuit infiltrator, and at the prompting of my good friend Bill Hughes, who wrote The Secret Terrorists, showing the Jesuits behind so many different things in history, and how they played the part, you know, in some of these tragedies that happened, even the sinking of the Titanic.
Isn't that something?
You know, the Oklahoma bombing. You know, we're talking about the World Trade Centers.
Yes.
There's a whole chapter on the Jesuits and the Great Controversy, how they're going to infiltrate, you know, and we have more to fear from within. We're told from Ellen White, than from without. See, whether you believe what she's sharing or not, or from Dr. Wilkinson or not, I think that this is tragedies that have happened in Adventism from Dr. Kellogg, from questions on doctrine, and I believe that the Jesuits are behind it all. I believe they're infiltrated Tacoma Park. I believe they've infiltrated our colleges and our universities. They're pushing the spiritual formation agenda right now and the one movement. They're trying to take our kids into feeling, into rock music, into emptying our minds and letting God fill us, and going to the monks of Catholicism to learn how they can teach our people how to worship God more effectively and to get in tune by emptying their mind. This is a Jesuit plot.
Can I tell one other story that I just thought of very quickly?
Please do.
This is when Dr. Wilkinson was back in Battle Creek. Ellen White was shown a vision in which she saw two young men who would present themselves to the college to enter the theology program.
Now, this is before it happened?
Before it happened. And the Lord warned her that she was to warn the college not to let those young men in, for they were Jesuits. So Dr. Wilkinson told us that story of how she was warned. And they did not let them in. But Dr. Wilkinson told us also that she had been shown that they would keep trying to get into our denomination, but they said that they would not be able to get in until she is dead. And so they waited for Ellen White to die, and then they started infiltrating.
And what are we seeing in our church today?
We're
in our church? We're riddled with new theology, books of a new order, Jesuit priests speaking to our students,
That's it.
Catholic priests coming in to speak to our students, people being called forward to receive communion, as the Catholics do in the Eucharist, merging with hospitals with the Catholic Church.
That's it.
I'm seeing a transformation in our church, and I want to say this, that the church will appear about to fall. It won't. It will remain while the sinners in Zion are sifted out. And Ellen White says in Acts of the Apostles, page 11, that faithful souls have constituted the church of God from the beginning. God will have a triumphant church. Truth will triumph, Dr. Wilkinson.
Amen.
Remember his title of his book?
That's right.
And I want to say that God has his little company, his small remnant, his faithful few that are going to go through and finish this job of preaching the three angels' messages to the world. Now,
Amen.
June, when I asked you to sit with me, and you know I wrote the Virgin Mary book, and 3 million copies in 7 languages. I was in St. Louis when the Pope, John Paul II, met with Clinton. We gave out 60,000 Virgin Mary books at the largest indoor papal mass in history. I've had death threats, and while we're passing out these books, and while we're giving out literature exposing the beast of Revelation 13, the Adventists were apologizing through the media for the dissident groups
going on.
that were there standing in defense of the truth and exposing the beast, right? And the first beast that was before him.
But you know, there were things that came out later. The work that you did and that others did who were also there passing out literature had its results.
Thank you.
Because the crowds that came out to see the Pope were not as large as they had anticipated.
They weren't.
And this also shows, though, that God has faithful people in Rome. There was a Roman Catholic priest that was watching some of our people give out this literature. He walked up to them, asked for a book, he looked through it, and then he came back. He said, "Can I help you pass these out?"
No.
Yes.
Kidding.
So
I hadn't heard that
I
one.
really believe that there are children in Rome who will one day stand up for this truth when our people are falling by the wayside.
Well, you know, I think the big point today is that even though the devil has hit our denomination in many ways and severely.
Yes.
And we know not just the alpha of apostasies happened, but the omega is coming.
Yes.
And Ellen White says that she's startled for our people.
Yes.
You're seeing spiritualism come in. You're seeing the change in the music, the worship styles, the worldliness, the spiritual formation. You're seeing books of a new order, human philosophies. She also saw that all this would happen before the sweeping away of the structure. You know she said that?
Yes, but I believe this. Jesus said, "My sheep hear my voice."
He will triumph.
And he will triumph.
Amen.
Because those in modern Israel who really love the Lord are not going to
We're
be
not
fooled.
going to go down.
No, they will not go down. And actually, those that are going out, it's a purging. I believe the purging has been going on in our church almost since it started.
In keeping with his message of brotherhood and tolerance, Pope John Paul presided over an ecumenical service at the Cathedral Basilica.
Holy Father, your visit to St. Louis
and to our metropolitan community is moving swiftly toward its end. This hour of your visit is special also for many people outside the Catholic community. With willingness and graciousness, our brothers and sisters of the ecumenical and interreligious community have accepted the invitation to come together this evening with your holiness.
All nations will come and worship before you, O Lord, and worship before you,
Lord. A reading from the book of the prophet Isaiah. I read the first sentence in Hebrew, the original language of the prophet. Yasisum midbar v'tziyah v'tagel arava v'tifrach b'chavatzalet. The desert and the parched land will exult. The steppe will rejoice and blossom. They will blossom with abundant flowers and rejoice with joyful song. The glory of Lebanon will be given to them, the splendor of Carmel and Sharon. They will see the glory of the Lord, the splendor of our God. The word of the Lord.
Your Holiness, your historic visit to St. Louis, Missouri has served as a catalyst in the creation of this program, and it transforms your presence into a lasting legacy for our region. Today, we present to you this proclamation announcing the creation of Faith Beyond Walls. Your commitment to improving interfaith relations has fostered an environment wherein the spirit of collective faith, positively action can thrive. In addition, we also present you with this banner, the emblem of Faith Beyond Walls. We hope and pray that it will inspire interfaith communities around the world to focus their efforts on improving health and the quality of life for all humanity. Again, we welcome you to our region.
Well, it's a sad thing when people don't get involved, because if we're not constantly working, we're going to be moving backwards in our own spiritual experience, because unless we're out there trying to win souls, we're missing something in our Christian walk.
Absolutely.
And I think this team that came, we were the ones that were out there protesting. I mean, the Lord clearly had the whole thing under His care, and 40 workers. I mean, we did it. We had it covered.
Praise the Lord.
And there was a lot of people that were obviously resistant to this book, but there were many, many people that were very sincere. They're seeking for the truth. They took the book, and we just have to pray that the Holy Spirit will help that seed to grow.
Christian, that God has taken the reins into His own hands, and you could see that in St. Louis here.
Absolutely.
And this part of January 1999. And I'm excited. We're right at the tiptoes of Earth's history, and I urge Adventists to not be like Jonah and make excuses. Let's start, or the ones in Christ's time that said we've just taken a wife, or we've bought a bit of land, or we've done this or that. Let's make excuses to do something, because there's no use us being in heaven and sitting down with the great patriarchs and the disciples and listening to their stories of victory, and when they turn to us, we are going to say, we were going to do this or do that, but we didn't have time.
Right.
I think our Adventist church is sleeping deep, and they need to wake up.
Yeah.
Because you know what? If they're not going to get the truth to these people, the rocks are going to cry out, and they're going to have to pay, and they're going to have to answer God of heaven. And God's going to require of them, what did you do with my talents?
Amen.
They're sitting on their money in their banks when these people are starving from spiritual truth, and they're going to go to their grave without Jesus, and we are the ones who are going to have to answer for it. And I think this church needs to, worldwide, needs to wake up. And one day God is going to spew them all out completely. And you know what? And it's going to be a sad day.
That's right.
And I pray by God's grace that I be one of the faithful ones that would stand through Jesus Christ.
I will remember all of you. God bless St. Louis. God bless America.
what our friend heard 2 weeks ago in Illinois. Tim, get ready. Your name is almost time for your name to come up. Brothers and sisters, some people don't want to hear certain things. But if the trumpet's going to have a certain sound, if we're going to wake up out of sleep, if we're going to wake up out of lethargy, if we're going to get ready, doesn't the trumpet have to sound, have a sense of urgency? Doesn't it have to sound an alarm? Sister White said, what about a trumpet that doesn't know how to sound? How can the armies ever go to war? The trumpet has to sound a sense of urgency. Dun, taka-dun, taka-dun, dun, dun, taka-dun, boom, boom, march. Right? The drums, boom, boom. People start marching. But if the trumpets go, da, 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 or even better, da, 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 da. That's the kind of trumpets we're hearing in a lot of places. We're hearing the taps. Go to sleep. We'll let you know when it's time to wake up. We're here in Silver Spring. We're near Washington. We know what is happening. We will let you know. And that's why nobody said anything when the Pope came. Because I happen to know that there is a lot of Rome's influence inside our headquarters. In fact, a friend of mine, Pastor Jeremiah Davis, he made a statement. There are more demons in Silver Spring than any place in the world. And we're going, what? Well, if you were the devil and you knew that God had a people, and you knew that if God woke up the people, you are lost, what would you do? Where would you send your demons? To the world headquarters. Our world leaders are more under attack than any of us. Because if they pronounce the wrong thing, it keeps the people asleep. Rome is attacked there. My wife and I have personal experience. I won't mention what it is. Personal experience with the administration. Some of the administration telling us, the Jesuits aren't our enemies, they're our friends. My wife and I, they told that to my wife and I. I'm sorry, they're not my friends.
That's right. Amen.
I work in South America where there's a lot of them, and they've threatened my life several times, and they've killed a lot of God's people over the years. They're willing to kill, to torture, to rip open, to poison anybody that gets in their way. And they're our friends? Sorry, not mine. The South American Division prepared a recent presentation. They sent to all the churches, and I was there listening. It was a Brazilian pastor. He said, before I started theology, I was working as a coal porter. And he said, I was selling Great Controversy and all the Ellen G. White books. They don't do that anymore, by the way, just so you know. They don't sell E.G. White books anymore in South American Division. I don't know in North America. I don't know about other places, but I suspect that there's very few of them. Anyway, so he was selling Great Controversy, and he went by a Catholic church, and he saw that there was some housing there, probably for all the priests. So he just said, I'm going to go knock on the door. So he went over there and knocked on the door, and the priest came out, and he said, I just want to show you what I'm selling. I'm selling different books. And so the priest said, let me see what you have. And he took a book out. Great Controversy, huh? Young man, let me show you something. He went to his shelf, pulled off a book. He says, Great Controversy. And look, every page is underlined. He said, we've all been reading it. And guess what? We're planning, when it's time, we're going to be preaching this message to all our congregations, and we're going to stand out and be separate. And we're going to keep the Sabbath, and we're going to be ready for God's coming. The young man was stunned. You mean to say you read this book and you know who the true church is? Oh, no, we don't know that. At first I thought the Seventh-day Adventist church was, but then after we analyzed it, we realized you all don't believe what's in here and you don't keep it anyway, so you can't be God's true church. So we're still waiting for God to show us what the true church is. But we do know that this is truth, but you Adventists don't believe it. And so after showing that video, the pastor came forward and said, let's go out and sell these books everywhere. Yeah, but it wasn't the Great Controversy. It's some other books they're selling. That's the thing. We talk about the Great Controversy, but we use it to sell other books. There's no doubt the Great Controversy will shake up people. Amen. But we don't sell the Great Controversy anymore. In fact, we tried to buy some. My wife went to buy some at the store the other day, ABC down there, and she couldn't find any. And so she says, well, I'd like to buy some. But why do you want to buy some? Because I want to, we're not going to have them available. I want to buy a box full. We don't make them available by the box full. If you want to buy one, we can find one. So, the devil has been very successful in dumbing us down so that we can no longer say anything, do anything. We have to be politically correct. But when Adventist pastors tell you sola scriptura, you know what they mean? No spirit of prophecy. What was for Martin Luther a truth is for us a rebellious lie. Sola scriptura is only when that's all there was. God gave us a spirit of prophecy to go side by side. The same angel that spoke to Daniel the prophet spoke to Ellen G. White. The same Jesus that spoke to John the Baptist spoke to Ellen G. White. And somebody said, but she's only the lesser light. Well, which of the prophets were a greater light? Can you think of one prophet that said, I'm the greater light? Not a single one. They're all lesser lights. And when you put all the lesser lights together, you get the greater light. So the spirit of prophecy is a lesser light, but put together with all the other lesser lights, it becomes part of the greater light. Do you understand? Yes. So what part of God's revelation are you able to reject without endangering your soul? None. The spirit of prophecy is a revelation for our time. And did you know that's the second thing that got changed of our basic beliefs? I don't know if you're aware. In 2015, I was sitting there for the first time since 1980. I haven't missed a general conference. I've been busy at my booth talking to people. But for the first time, this last time, I sat there and listened to every word. And I saw those two changes proposed. And I listened as the delegates begged that they take those off of the proposed item. And the chairman asked the delegates, would you like to take it off? And they said, no, leave it on there. Nobody forced us to take that decision. We did it to ourselves. Because most of the Seventh-day Adventist Church does not believe in the imminent coming of Jesus Christ. And what they changed was that the spirit of prophecy no longer is a source of truth. What does that mean? It's not inspired. Do you understand? When God speaks, it is truth. Amen. And if it isn't a source of truth, it is not to be quoted. It is not to be used as inspired literature. What a slap on Jesus' face. He got 2 big slaps at the General Conference. Now, I got to confess, it was my favorite General Conference. Why? Because they paused for prayer more than any other General Conference I can remember. It was a beautiful spiritual high for me to be at the General Conference because it was prayer, 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 prayer. I loved it. But the devil got in 2 home runs. Seventh-day Adventists no longer believe officially that the spirit of prophecy is a source of truth and that Jesus' coming is imminent. I'm sorry, I still do. Amen. I consider that to be an act of rebelliousness, carelessness, and very hurtful to Jesus. His own people reject the light that he gave us for this last time. What happens if you reject the testimonies? One thing is certain. Those who reject the testimonies will march under the banner of Satan. Amen. That's why most of our people will find themselves, sadly enough, on the outside when the door of probation closes. But God doesn't want anybody to. We're right at the end of time, and God has a special plan for His people, and He wants them to be there, and He wants them to be there, and He wants them to be there. That's why I spend almost all my time preaching in Adventist churches, because that's the main focus. God's people need to wake up to the reality of, we have a few months left. What have you desired to? Would you rather be told after the final exam? Or would you rather be told before the final exam that you will be having one soon? Listen carefully to this. We're going to finish with these thoughts. The Lord abhors indifference and disloyalty in a time of crisis in His work. Are we in a time of crisis now? Everywhere we see the churches fracturing. We see people being disloyal. We see our basic beliefs being destroyed. We see sermons being preached that are totally, how about this sermon for a homosexual agenda? Adam and Steve. Well, it was preached at PUC. And the man was promoted. You see those kind of disloyal type of sermons, and you say, why don't they say something? Why doesn't somebody do anything? The Lord abhors indifference. Are you just enjoying life, coming to church, hearing a good sermon? How nice. We're in crisis. If you're middle of the road right now, God abhors that. He doesn't abhor you, He loves you. But the status of being in the middle of the road during a time of crisis makes Him indignant. His special blessing, God's special blessing, accompanies the labors of men of action. Men who will not be swerved from the straight line of duty, but with divine energy inquire, who is on the Lord's side? This is on page 236 of Christian Service. Who is on the Lord's side? Men who will not stop merely with the inquiry, but will demand that those who choose to identify themselves with the people of God, demand, Demand. That's a hard word. Demand that if you choose to identify yourself with the people of God, that you will step forward and reveal unmistakably your allegiance to the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. You claim to be an Adventist? Prove it. Don't bring out these credentials. I work for the conference. I want to see if you're an Adventist. I want to see if you're loyal to what we believe and teach. I want to see if you're loyal to the spirit of prophecy. I want to see if you're loyal to the mission of the church. Don't give me this loyalty to the Union Division and General Conference. We ought to be loyal. I need to be loyal to my wife. But if I'm more loyal to my wife than to God, that's called idolatry. If my wife should choose someday to leave, Lord, God forbid, I must still go on. And if some of my leaders go off to the side and become friends with the Vatican, I'm sorry, we part ways. You understand? It is time to choose sides. And so God's leaders are going to say unmistakably, you claim to be an Adventist, you better prove it. Not because we're trying to make somebody what they're not. We're just trying to say, don't just act like it. Get off a dead sinner and live the message. The church is not a church. By the way, the church is about to collapse. The structure is about to collapse. But let me make it clear. The structure was made by God. Just like my airplane was. As a tool to carry out the work. The airplane's not going to be saved, and neither is the structure. There's no legal papers going to go to heaven. There's no corporation that's going to make it to heaven. What's going to make it to heaven is people. But the structure was given to us to help carry out the work and organize it better. Just like all these bolts and metal sheets and aluminum sheets are put together. And guess what? I got an airplane where I can travel around the world. But the airplane's not going to be saved. But it was given to me of God as a compilation of little individual pieces so that the work can go faster. The corporate structure was given to us by God so we could carry out the work. Certainly not to block the work. Certainly not to interfere with God's work. And when it starts to interfere with God's work, God lets it disassemble. And it is interfering in many places with God's work. So, God is telling us right now, don't be afraid of holding the standard up. The church is not a corporation. The church is a movement. The Adventist church is a movement. Are you part of the Adventist movement? Let me describe the Adventist movement to you. Everything you have is put on the altar. Your time, your money, your influence. One thing is on your mind. Carry out the mission. Carry out the mission. Carry out the mission. That's what the movement is. No matter what you suffer personally, your focus is on carrying out the mission. The church is going to continue under attack. Apparently, the church is going to continue disintegrating. Apparently, we're going to continue losing our hospitals, many of which are just going to be Catholic hospitals now. Our Adventist hospitals that have given up on the health message and serve meat and pork at our Adventist hospitals can expect very soon to be disassembled. Our Adventist churches that are wealthy, increased in goods, and have need of nothing will soon find that they're miserable, poor, blind, and naked. Our leaders that refuse to sound the trumpet will soon be removed from leadership. The church will come under a tremendous attack. If you want to know what's going to happen, just Google Ellen White, Loma Linda train station. Ellen White, Loma Linda train station. Ellen White was walking with her secretary, with her nieces, with her granddaughter's husband, Pastor Robinson, and another friend, and they asked Ellen White, what's about to happen at the end of time? And she said, I saw a storm suddenly hit the church like one of those storms that leaves nothing standing, and there was nothing left. Every single Adventist disappeared. They fled like the disciples when they abandoned Jesus. But after the storm, there was a calm, and they began to pop up. She said, I looked, and among those that popped up, I saw no shepherds. They were disoriented, like sheep without a shepherd. So they had to get together and pray, and they had to re-elect leaders from among themselves. And they elected people who had never sought a position in the church before. In other words, humble people. No, I don't want to be. I'm not qualified. My brother, you're the one we're going to ask to do it. They prayed for the Holy Spirit, which was granted them. And the Holy Spirit was poured out, and they went forth as a mighty army, fair as the moon, bright as the sun, with banners, symbolizing the loud cry. God gave them the Holy Spirit, and they finished the work. The little small group of people that was left. And you remember Sister White saw that fast train, and the conductor, a handsome, tall man, leading the entire world to destruction was Satan himself. And Sister White said to the angel, but where are your people? Behind you. Small groups of people were climbing the mountain. Let me ask you something. You think on that train there was air conditioning? No. On a train? On a train. Do you think there was all kinds of food on the train? Was there entertainment on the train? Maybe a TV station, a TV net set right on behind every chair. All kinds of movies. What do you think? What about on the mountain? Was there air conditioning there? Different type of air conditioning, huh? Was there all kinds of foods and everything available, or were there some people maybe that were suffering some hunger? Was it hard, difficult task to crawl up the mountain? But they had God's protection and provision, didn't they? Everybody else on the train died. Those who were on the mountain persevered and reached the holy city. Brothers and sisters, what's about to hit the church, probably every single Adventist, you and I, will disappear. They asked her, was this only Loma Linda? And she said, no, it's worldwide. And I want to tell you something. What's about to hit the church is going to be a broadside. All the newspapers, all the TV networks, 1,000 hidden batteries are aimed at the church, waiting for the moment when they hear the word, fire. When that sign is given, expect CNN to target the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Expect all the media networks to attack the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Expect the United Nations, the U.S. government. If that's the kind of people we have here, we will deal with them. Expect Donald Trump to show no mercy. Look at his face. Is he a merciful person? We should pray for him. He's our president. We should pray that God will hold the winds, because that man is capable of anything. And if God releases the winds, Donald Trump has no problem signing death warrants for anybody. Unconstitutional or not, he will do it. I'll tell you what, brothers and sisters, when that storm hits, let me tell you what will probably be the accusation. Every single country in the world has anti-terrorist laws. Russia just shut down the Jehovah's Witnesses on accusations of terrorism. They're not terrorists. They're nice people. We don't agree with them theologically, but they're not terrorists. But guess what? When you label somebody a terrorist, you can use the laws against them. The terrorist, anti-terrorist laws, I realized all of a sudden when I was in Spain, John Paul II, the Pope, wrote in a newspaper, and I picked up in the airplane and I read, the Pope says that anybody who speaks against Rome is a terrorist and the laws should apply to them in particular. All the anti-terrorist laws are anti-Adventist laws. I want you to know that. God's people are the focus. They're just practicing in Russia on Jehovah's Witnesses. That's not the real purpose of those laws. The real purpose is to stop the loud cry. So they will use them one of these days. Maybe you'll go into hiding. Maybe I will go into hiding. But you know what? After the storm, there was a calm. And God's people pulled together whatever was left. Many said, many will leave, never come back. Like, well, I didn't know my church was that way. Well, I don't know. Some pastors will say, well, if the conference can't pay me a salary and give me my retirement, I'm not going to work for them anymore. This was a job. It wasn't a calling, it was a job. I was working for a good retirement. No. The real pastors are those that are called by God. Amen. They work with or without a salary. That's right. Pastor's wife knows what that means. My pastor's wife could also say the same thing. You know what? If you're called of God, God is the one who pays you your salary. Not humans. God may use humans. Whether they do or not, doesn't matter. You still work for God. So I'm asking you, do you want to work for God? God wants to enlist you today. He wants to train you to be God's special forces. And one day soon, there's going to be a people that have a seal on their forehead, and it's going to say Special Forces. And if you want to know what it's like, just read Joel 2. This group of people are going to climb right over the walls, going over the roofs, and climb into the windows. That's what it says. Before them, all faces gather paleness. Why is it because we want to stand? It's because God needs a people that can prove Satan wrong. Amen. Satan is a liar. He's a destroyer. He has come nothing but to kill and to destroy and to steal. That's what he's here for, says John 10. And you know what? God needs a people that can say, Satan, you are wrong. You lied about God. And my life, lived under the total control of God, proves Satan is a liar. We can be victorious like Jesus was victorious. The official position of the church is it's not possible to overcome sin perfectly. I'm so sad for those theologians that believe that, because they cannot be successful. Because when you keep saying, I can't, the answer is, you can't. In order to be able to be sealed perfectly, you have to know that it's possible, and you have to believe it's possible, and you have to want to be part of that group. Yes. The more you fight saying you can't, you're doing Satan's work. Because as long as God's people say we can't, we've been told we can't, he can keep you sleeping until it's too late. Hoping God will not find the people, but God will find the people. I've preached in more than 100 countries, and it's happening all over the world today. People are getting ready for the seal. Do you want to be there? Amen. Oh, yes, we want to be there.
So we may think this guy at the top, is just up there and he can't control everybody. It's just such a vast body of believers. He can't gather up all the fragments and they just do their own thing. I don't believe that. I really don't. I have a relative who was personal friends with Ted Wilson's father, and she has told me that his father was a 33rd degree Mason, and proud of it. And as the father, so the son. It comes down through the line. If father has faithfully done his job, those initiates, those clothing, those books are passed on to the son. We need to be wide awake at this time. And if I may share this, you know, I have people calling our ministry all the time and saying, you know, you need to just get rid of your bitterness and come back into the church. God's man is here now. He's the man of the hour. And I have shared this with 2 or 3 friends of mine that have said that to me, and it's early writings. If we were studying, we wouldn't be saying, oh, do I go back now or do I not? Early writings, page 261 says, listen to this closely. I saw that God has honest children among the nominal Adventists and the fallen churches. And before the plague shall be poured out, ministers and people will be called out from these churches. Will be called out from these churches. Is it time to go back? No. Will be called out from these churches and will gladly receive the truth. Satan knows this. And before the loud cry of the third angel is given, he raises an excitement in these religious bodies. What do you think this great hope is? Excitement. This is it. In these religious bodies, that those who have rejected the truth may think that God is still with them. He hopes to deceive the honest and lead them to think that God is still working for the churches. But the light will shine, and all who are honest will leave the fallen churches and take their stand with the remnant.
Amen. Melanie, I'm really curious, and I know this may be an impossibility. The statement about Ted Wilson's dad being a 33rd degree Mason, is there any way that there's a document?
No, there's no document. But am I on camera?
Yeah. Look it up on the internet and see what we can find out.
You know what? I will say this, whether I'm on camera or not. There was a homeschool group that was funded by the government. I worked for them when I was 18 for a year, half a year, I believe, packing books. They were started and funded by the government because in the 70s, a lot of people said the school system is bad, and they started homeschooling. The government said, we're losing track of all these children. We've got to keep a lid on these children. We've got to train the next generation. So they paid this man who was on the Board of Education for the United States of America. His name was Dr. Raymond Moore. My aunt worked for him for years. I went to work for him when I was 18. On that board was Ted Wilson's father. He spent a lot of time with my aunt and told her, I'm a third degree Mason. She swore me to secrecy some 10, 12 years ago about this, but God's people have to know, and I am not afraid to die for telling you, because people, we need to wake up and realize there have been a lot of foxes in the hen house for a long time, but God says the light will shine, and we need to wake up and say, you know, the text that comes clear to my mind over and over as I think about all of these things and try and find my way through the muddle is the Lord tells us, put not your trust in princes or in the sons of man whose breath is in his nostrils. Who can we trust? Can we trust these guys at the top? All we can trust is the Word of God, because the men who wrote this book did not breathe while they were in vision. Daniel, he breathed not. Ellen White did not breathe when she was in vision. Amen. Those are the people we can trust, to the law and to the testimony. If they speak not according to this word, there is no light in them.
So let's preach everything we have to preach. Oh, but unless we've signed an agreement with Rome that we're not going to do it. Rome went and did all their homework last year and gathered all the church leaders everywhere and made them sign, not made them, requested that they sign a document saying we will all work together, we will not criticize each other, and definitely we will not fight on the opposite side from each other. Everybody signed. And now we have freedom to preach anything we want to preach. And guess what? We can't, because we've already agreed not to preach against them. Yes?
You said we had all signed agreements with Rome not to speak contrary to each other or protest of each other. Does that include the Seventh-day Adventist Church officially?
That includes many places of the Seventh-day Adventist Church officially. For example, I happen to know of several union presidents that signed it. I happen to know that we have met with them. Our religious liberty director met with the Pope and the religious leaders. I did not see the video of them signing, but he went to the signing, they went to the meeting, and almost always, the Adventist is always placed at the end, so that after they greet all the other churches, the last event is the Seventh-day Adventist Church and Rome are now together. And that has happened, and you know what? Going to those events, I'm sorry, that's called spiritual adultery. Because when you spend time with the great whore, it's called an illegitimate relationship. And that's called adultery. And that's what we've been doing all over the world. But I will not say what I don't know. I don't know if the world church has agreed to do it because I don't know that. But I do know at least 2 and 3 unions that have done it on an official basis, and I do know of those. So I don't know what levels. The only involvement at the General Conference level that I know of is that we've had a relationship with the Vatican for a long time. And if you want to read a book about spiritual adultery, there's a book at the ABC called Building Bridges. And that's about how we've built a bridge to Rome and how we have good relationships with the Vatican. And I call that spiritual adultery because all the kings of the earth commit adultery with that same woman. And we've been standing in line with all the kings of the earth, Donald Trump. And he's going there. All I know is that if somebody is declared to be a prostitute, we are to have no relationship. And so and we have a relationship. So I don't want to make a statement of what I don't know, but I do know that we have signed on several countries.
Follow-up question on that. If you said several conferences have signed that agreement.
Union.
Wouldn't that mean that any pastor under them who teaches the straight truth would wind up losing their position?
Yes,
or their
they would be violating that agreement. Mm-hmm.
You got that handled though, because you get paid from the man above.
Well, in the end, all pastors will be volunteers.
Yeah.
And so pastors need to preach the truth regardless of the consequences. And if you protect your job at the expense of, if God convicts you to preach something and you don't, then there's consequences too. You see speaking for God. I was in Holland, and in Holland is used to be a missionary country. And Holland today is one of the most immoral countries in the world as far as legislation is concerned. And I was there, and as you might be aware, there's Dutch islands in the Caribbean, and there's French islands in the Caribbean, which belong to the Inter-American division. So they study theology in a conservative division, but they go home to Europe and to France and to Holland to be able to work. Well, one of my colleagues, I was working in a union office in Venezuela, Dutch Antilles Union, and one of my colleagues who was a pastor went back to Holland to preach, and he invited me to speak in his church, and when I was there, he said, I have a problem. I'm not allowed to speak against anything of immorality. If the young people live together, I cannot speak. If they commit adultery, I can't do anything. If there's homosexuals, I can't do anything. I will lose my job if I even raise the subject of immorality. And so he says, David, what do you think I should do? I said, well, it's very easy what you should do. If you want to keep your job, keep your mouth shut, but then you go to hell. If you want to make God happy as your chief shepherd, you got to preach the truth. But then I will lose my job. Well, then go back home and work in Inter-America again. So I told him those are the only 2 decisions. Make God happy or make man happy and go to hell. Choose you can't be a shepherd for God and not speak the truth. So anyway, we're facing those same decisions now around here in the United States and other countries. We're facing decisions where we either preach what God tells us to preach or we might lose our job. Yeah.
I have 2 questions. The documents that were signed recently, Are they the same?
By the president or the ones that we're talking about
with the union,
okay.
yes. Are they the same as the BME documents from 1982 with the baptism and Eucharist documents?
No, I think it's just an agreement between everybody to act loving toward each other and never say anything that would incommodate or criticize another religion.
Okay.
It's kind of like, we're all brothers in Christ. Let's never say anything that would make us uncomfortable. Well, the one who wins there is Rome.
Okay.
It's just that we're not trying to focus on, but I was asked that question. I was preaching to a large congregation, and they stood up and said, what about the document that our union president just signed on public television, and everybody stood there and everybody saw it? I said, I don't know. I wasn't there. I can't say. All I know is that anybody who has an official relationship with a whore, it's called adultery. And God doesn't look very kindly on the spiritual adultery at all. To give them meat in due season. Blessed is the servant when his Lord cometh, finds him so doing. In other words, we're here to feed the servants. If we're in administration, be it official church administration, be it ministry administration, be it any kind of influence over others, we are here to care for them. And if we start lording it over them, look what happens. It says, verse 47, verily I say unto you that he shall make him ruler over all his goods. But if that evil servant says in his heart, my Lord delayeth his coming, and shall begin to smite his fellow servants and to eat and drink with the drunken, the Lord of that servant shall come in a day that he thinks not, and he's not aware of, and shall cut him asunder and appoint his portion with the hypocrites, and there shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. I am seeing part of what I'm seeing in Central America in some places, in South America and some others. I don't know about all the other places. I know that in Europe, in Germany, I've seen it happen, North Germany, and it probably happens in other parts. Brethren are treated very harshly sometimes by administration. I just came from Ecuador, and just a week before I got there, or soon before I got there, they had disfellowshipped the entire church and closed the church. And the only thing they said was, first when I came, they said, sure, take the pulpit, and they were just kind of like friends, and they didn't have any idea what was coming. And then they just gave them an order. You will do this, this, and this. And they said, but that's not biblical. And they said, if you don't do it, we will deal with you. I know, but we can't, it's not biblical. Okay, boom, 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 boom. They just fellowshipped everybody and closed the church. And they said, what sin are we being punished for? No sin in the Bible. You're being punished for administrative sin. What's administrative sin? You disobeyed the pastor. That happened in Ecuador just a few months ago. I tell you, it's not the only place it's happening. It's happening in a lot of places. There is a tendency to abuse authority. And some of the people that were raised had never been to church there. They lived in another country, and they'd been gone for 10 years. They were disfellowshipped too. Just because they had their membership there. And so the people came to me crying, what do we do? And I was in Germany. And I preached in a North German church, and it was mainly Russians in Germany, in that part of the church. And they said we had about 30 people disfellowshipped. Why? Because they were starting to preach the health message everywhere and giving away great controversies. 2 pastors and 30-something church members were disfellowshipped. What was the sin? They did not obey the administration. So we're replacing human authority over biblical authority. And if you disobey human authority, you get dealt with. Now, I'm just mentioning this because this is becoming a trend. It's happening more and more. In other words, the Pope has spoken, and so shall it be. But we don't have kings and popes in the Adventist church. We're not supposed to. But this is happening at an increasing rate, which makes me wonder, what's going to happen to these people that deal so harshly? They don't believe that Jesus is coming anytime soon. These evil servants say in their heart, my Lord delayeth his coming, and they begin to beat their fellow servants. So I'm really concerned for these people. Because the other people that get this fellowship, God knows, I tell them, don't worry, your membership is still written in heaven.
Amen. Amen.
We're not saved by our earthly membership, but we value it. We value our earthly membership. But your real membership is, where is it written? In heaven. And so nobody on earth can touch your heavenly membership. Amen. But the people who act that way, I believe in their heart they think they're helping the church. They're defending the church. They're defending the church, and this is called institutionalization. When the institution becomes so important that your main priority is protecting the institution instead of the mission. Right. I used to teach graduate business classes for Andrews University. And I learned in my graduate business classes, I learned that an institution grows through much sacrifice, it matures rapidly and reaches maturity and begins to highly produce, and then eventually it becomes institutionalized so that the institution becomes more important than the mission, and then it begins to die. And then it dies. We're already on the beginning to die. We're watching hospitals close, we're watching schools close, we're watching the institution break apart, we're watching the main pillars beginning to shake and crack. And the more that does, instead of returning back to the mission, the more we defend the institution. But that's going to kill us even worse. The only thing that can save the church and save you is mission. Amen. If you return to focus on the mission, the church will then grow, reverse the trend, and it will begin to grow again and begin to strengthen again. But the more we defend the institution, the more we kill it. Because the institution is not what accomplishes the mission. The institution is like, some of you know how to play soccer. I don't know how to play American football too much, but I grew up playing soccer. And I'll tell you what, the best defense you have is to have a really strong offense. If the ball is already always on the other side where score, 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 the goalie has nothing to do. But some people play defense. Everybody's in the back. Don't let them score a goal. Don't let them. You can never win a game that way. The most you can do is tie 0-0. And so we're playing defense all around the world. And if anybody, it looks like they're not obeying, we got to get rid of them. But you're shooting yourself in your foot because you're getting rid of your own members. You're getting rid of your own members that keep you alive. That's right. So this has to be either reversed, or the consequences naturally will be, it will continue to break apart into smaller and smaller and smaller pieces, which in the end, there's only going to be small groups left when Jesus comes anyway. But it's a very traumatic, painful thing that's happening. And it's because of institutionalization. It's because our administrators many times believe that their job is to protect the institution, and many of them were never taught mission as their main priority. But you got to take care of your sheep, and you got to feed them, and you got to let them think for themselves, because in the end, no pastor is going to save you. That's right. Your own decisions and relationship with the Lord is going to save you. So Latin America has a lot of Catholic thinking, because we came out of Catholicism, many of us, and it's easy to think that, well, the president spoke and we have to obey. Well, it doesn't make me very popular, but I'm speaking and teaching on television everywhere and speaking in churches. How is the Adventist church structured? Jesus said, in the world there are kings that lord it over others, but it will not be that way among you. The leaders will be servants. Amen. So the Adventist church was built with the authority on the bottom. That's right. That's why we have General Conference every 5 years, because Ted Wilson doesn't just give an executive order and everybody jumps to it. That's not where the power is. He just presides, and he has great influence and great visibility, but he doesn't have the authority to dictate to the church what to do. The church members come together from delegates from all around the world, and they have the authority to make permanent changes. And it's the same way in every church. The church board has the authority. So when a mission president comes and says, you're a race, you're disfellowship, all of you are disfellowship, that's an abuse of power. He doesn't even have that authority, but that's what they do all the time. They come and they disfellowship everybody because the president did it. So we have to teach our members the authority is hold it, pastor. Let's meet as a church board and we'll make the decision. You see, so I'm teaching them, and they're beginning to learn. And already just in in Bolivia, 2 or 3 churches have said, hold it, hold it, hold it. We have to make the decision. What do you mean? I just told you what to... No, but the authority is not there. The authority is down here. And they're discovering the truth.
Amen.
And that makes some administrators very upset to find out they're not kings after all. Amen. They're servants. And so, therefore, we need to train our people again how the Adventist church is structured. The Adventist church is structured from the bottom up. People are elected to serve the church, not to order it around. Okay, so Jesus wanted to teach us the principle that the person on top is a servant of all. And the authorities at the bottom, and those on top are servants. Right? You understand? So, as you begin to work for God, remember who you are. You're a servant. You might have leadership roles. This is a very special privilege. Use it correctly, but not dictator role.
Amen.
It's a servant role. And as you have a servant role, use your servanthood with love and kindness and serve those that are under your administration. And if you do that, you will be richly rewarded with a great loyalty from your church members or the people that you serve. And you will be rewarded with great success in advancing God's work. Yeah. It's right in the open. But people aren't listening. They're just enjoying the music. So, once I learned these different things, and then the Pope comes on, and I started saying, now, hold it a minute. If it's exactly on the Day of Judgment, which is the Day of Atonement, and the Pope is allowed to say 14 years ahead of time, Satan announces the arrival of the Pope, they knew something that we didn't. They knew the date that they would be allowed to come to Washington. Not before, not after. God gave them a date. And since it happened to be right on the Day of Atonement, it means God also is moving on that date. Would you agree with me that the great controversy took a step forward when the Pope came to Washington? Let me see your hands if you believe that. Thank you. Now, here is the implication. When the Pope came to North America, the great controversy took one step closer, a giant step closer to the finishing of the great controversy. He came on one of God's calendar days. It tells me that God is also doing something up there. So what is the next step in God's agenda? You begin a judgment of the dead on October 22 of 1844. At some point in the future, you have to begin the judgment of the living. And if God began on the Day of Atonement, the next step forward in the judgment will probably be a Day of Atonement. So every Day of Atonement, we need to be watching. Could it be that God is moving now into the day judgment of the living? Well, you can't say yes or no, but you have to be watching. If you're watching and praying, you will begin to see evidences whether it happened or not. When everybody knows that when a Sunday law comes, the judgment of the living has begun. We know that. Because at that point, people are making life or death decisions. I mean, those are final decisions for eternity, right? But the Sunday law is the last in the chain of events. For Adventists, the Sunday law is the final exam. Because we're not going to start, there's not going to be a massive revival and a studying to understand the Sunday law better, and then an understanding of what is really happening at the Sunday law. The Sunday law is enforcement time. The Sunday law is to find out what side you're on. It's exam time. Therefore, the Sunday law is only the conclusion, the last closing event for Seventh-day Adventist Church for the day of probation to end. It will be yet open to those that never heard. Sunday keepers won't have a problem. The Baptist church down the street, they're going to continue on worshiping on Sunday, and they won't even know the Sunday law happened. It doesn't affect them at all. But I can guarantee you from this pulpit you'll know. Every Adventist pulpit, hopefully, unless you get a letter from a general conference saying this doesn't mean anything, don't preach about it. But hopefully every Adventist pulpit will be preaching to Adventists saying, brothers and sisters, the long expected day has arrived. The problem again, like I mentioned this morning, is it's too late to get ready. It's final exam time. How many of you remember college or your high school academy when they said, today's exam day, put your books under your table, under your desk. I forgot to study. Sorry, it's still exam time. And those that study, well, good, I'm ready. And those who didn't study, too bad. Well, the Sunday law is final exam time, and it's closing time. So I began to watch. I did not necessarily know or was not predisposed to believe that September 23 of 2015 was necessarily that day. But my eyes were wide open and I was watching. Well, as I've been praying and watching since then for 2 years, I am coming to believe that that's exactly what happened. Can I say that I know for sure? No, I can't. Can I say that I probably believe it had? Yes. And why is that? Because I'm watching certain things happen in the Adventist church. I'm watching people make very radical decisions for truth or away from truth. I'm watching people become less sensitive to Christian behavior. Leaders that I expected to act in a Christian-loving manner are acting in a very harsh, ungodly manner in many cases. I'm watching a close relationship developing between many Adventist leaders and Rome. I'm watching General Conference leaders meet with Rome and all of the other religious leaders. I'm hearing personally, some Adventist leaders have told me, we support a relationship, a close relationship with Rome because that will prevent persecution. But my response is then we should just become Catholic. That certainly will prevent persecution. Well, that's really what's happening. They are becoming Catholic. And secondly, my other response is indignation. This organization killed 30 million of our brethren, tortured and killed them and put them to death. And you believe that you should become a very close friend and sign alliance with this organization, which is really the bride of Satan? Jesus has his bride, but so does Satan. And the bride of Satan has her headquarters in Rome. And you're going to join forces believing that this is going to stop persecution? Let me tell you something. I said, when a little rat is dropped into a cage with a snake, the rat runs around everywhere, scared to death, and the snake doesn't do anything. The snake just sits there quietly, smiling. And pretty soon the rat starts calming down. And pretty soon the rat starts cleaning her paws. And then the rat gets up against the snake and takes a nap. And the rat says, nothing is wrong here. I thought I was in a dangerous environment, but there's nothing wrong. I'm in a friendly environment. You see, nothing has happened. And what is the snake doing? The snake is moving slowly closer and closer, and the rat is slowly closing his eyes. And suddenly, shut! And the rat goes to sleep, and the head disappears, and finally the waggling tail disappears. So we sign documents, and we have signed documents with Rome, cuddling against a snake, thinking that there's no danger and we haven't learned anything from the Great Controversy because many of our leaders don't even read the Great Controversy anymore. They don't believe in it anymore. And so they haven't learned the lesson that Rome bides its time and makes friends with all its enemies until it's ready to strike. They haven't learned because they don't read the Spirit of Prophecy anymore. One thing is certain, Sister White said, those who reject the testimonies will eventually march under the banner of Satan. And if you reject the testimonies like many of our people have, one thing is certain, 100% certain, they will join under Satan's banner. And that's what they're doing right now. So, as we're watching the church polarize, some toward Rome, and some toward God and a spirit of prophecy, and there's a reformation happening, I'm realizing that, you know what? God's people are in the judgment. I'm watching it happen. Can I say, David Gates said? Please don't say that. I cannot say that I'm 100% certain. I can only say that from that date I have been watching, and I am becoming more and more convinced that our time is almost out. And now after I see what our president is doing with Rome, I am almost 100% certain that the Sunday law is just around the corner. It's going to happen one day very soon. God has to give his permission first. Without God's permission, it ain't going to happen. But once God gives his permission, it will happen very fast. And when is God going to give his permission? Well, there's two things that have to happen. God's patience has to run out with wickedness. And his people, as many as will get ready, will have been made ready. Once God says, I'm not waiting any longer, I'll take what I can get, because waiting any longer will be worse. God will draw the line, and time is over. The Sunday law will happen. It'll be closing time for the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
When I became a Seventh-day Adventist pastor and teacher in 1985, it was my thought and my dream that I would be a Seventh-day Adventist conference pastor and teacher for the rest of my life. Because my dad had told me, son, if you go to PUC, I won't pay a penny of your tuition, and he meant it, and he kept his word. And to be a Seventh-day Adventist pastor and teacher within the denomination, that meant everything to me. Everything. I didn't worship my job. I worshiped God. In 1992, I was working in my last conference school as a teacher. The pastor of the church was gone. He had taken a position at another church. And so the elders in the church had to preach. Well, I was an honorary elder because I was the teacher at the school. And so I was asked to preach in the church and to teach Sabbath school. And that's when all the sparks started to fly. Because there were some wealthy people. And I'm not saying that just because somebody's wealthy that they have to do this, but it just so happened that in the last conference church I was in, there were two multimillionaires in the church, and they were related. And one of them loved me. And in fact, when I was fired in 1992, he opened up a school for me and funded the school for a year. The other millionaire hated me. When I got up to speak, you could guarantee the following Monday or Tuesday he'd be on the horn to the conference office with the message, you either shut Hughes up or I will not put my money into this conference. And money talks. Money talks. Finally, I was brought into the Northern California Conference office in April of 1992. I'd been pastoring and teaching in the denomination for 7.5 years. And the brethren that day, when I got ready to come down to the conference office, I told my wife, I said, sweetie, I said, you need to come with me today. She said, why? I said, I don't know why, but you just need to come. So we drove the 2 hours down to Pleasant Hill, California. It was in Northern California, beautiful area. We went in, and superintendent of education and his 2 associates, they all loved me. They loved my teaching. They knew the kids in the classroom loved me, the children. The parents loved me. And they said, Bill, we've got a school all lined up for you for the next school year. You'll be the head teacher in a 2-teacher school. You'll have a parsonage right there on the campus. And we're just real excited. It's a beautiful area in Northern California. And you can have it on one condition. I said, okay, what's the condition? And the superintendent of education looked at me right square in the eyes and he said, Bill, you got to promise me something right here in this room. I said, what's that, Elder Hutchins? He said, you got to promise me you will not teach or preach in public the 3 angels' messages. I looked at him and I said, Elder Hutchins, what do you want me to preach? He said, I want you to preach the love of God. I said, that is the love of God. He said, Bill, I'm not here to quibble with you. You make your decision. Well, I can be kind of a laid-back person. I had a wife and 2 children. And I believe very, very strongly that as the man of the house, it's my job, it's my duty, and it's my privilege to provide for my family. My wife is from Cairo, Egypt. She's a little bit more warm-blooded than I am. She talks a little bit faster than I do. And if she were here tonight, she would agree with me. She didn't sit back and think. She just looked at the man and said, Elder Hutchins, we won't be working for you next year. And Elder Hutchins, you know, he came over and he patted me on the shoulder and he said, just give it the weekend, Bill. I said, that's fine. I'll give you that. My wife and I walked out to the car. We got in and I started up the engine and my wife turned to me and she said, Bill, she said, I'm so glad that you told me to come down here with you today. I said, why is that, Hoda? She said, because if I wasn't there and you came home and told me what they told you, she said, I wouldn't have believed you. I still remember the men's names who fired me. And if I saw them today, if they walked through that door, I would step away from the platform and I'd go give them a great big hug. Did I agree with the stance that they took? No, I didn't. And I told them that. The following Monday, I called the conference office and I said to my immediate supervisor, a man named Elder White, I said, Floyd, I won't be working for you next year or ever again. He said, but Bill, how are you going to feed your family? I said, Floyd, the God who fed Elijah still lives today. That was 18 years ago. I haven't missed a meal. Nor my wife, nor my children. God has been good. There was a special board that was set up by the Seventh-day Adventist Church, 2001. In fact, it's mentioned in the Adventist News paper, I have that here, where they decided, Danny, here it is, Adventist News Network, February 3rd, 2004. They said this, the Adventist World Church created the International Board of Ministerial and Theological Education in September of 2001. Now listen to what it was designed to do. to provide overall guidance and standards to the professional training of pastors, evangelists, theologians, teachers, chaplains, and other denominational employees involved in ministerial and religious formation or spiritual formation in each of the church's 13 regions around the world. Danny, that's from the Adventist News Network, February 3rd, 2004. So in 2001, Danny, this board of the Seventh-day Adventist Church decided to teach spiritual formation to all the leaders in the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Yeah, I've heard this commented on. You know, I came into this Advent message, and it was about 1989, I would say. I fell in love with this message.
Amen.
I heard these messages exposing Roman Catholicism, you know, the Pope of Rome, going into Daniel 7, Revelation 13, all these beautiful messages on prophecy. I fell in love with this message in this church and the Sabbath and what it stood for. But
Amen.
I have seen such a transformation in this church today. I mean, we're seeing everything. I mean, we held to no jewelry in the church. Now you're seeing jewelry coming on to people. The clothes that are being worn, the music that's come in today, the dietary change, you know. There's so many different things. The message is watered down. You don't hear Revelation seminars exposing so clearly, okay, the Catholic Church anymore. You know, the church of the medieval times, the Church of Rome, you know, it's kind of watered down. And you're not hearing this anymore. And you know, not everybody knows this story about me. But years ago, I did a billboard campaign. And I put up billboards along with other people that were with us in the ministry at that time. Doctors, you know, professional people, they were funding this campaign.
Why did you put it up, Dan? I'm real curious. Why did you put those billboards up?
Because in my heart, I wanted to proclaim the three angels' messages. And the world needed to know who that beast was, who that little horn power was, who is going to enforce this mark of the beast, who's enforcing Sunday worship, you know, who persecuted the saints. You know, I felt that I needed to expose, as it says, the man of sin shall be revealed. That was the title of the first billboard. So we started a billboard campaign, and it was a Bible study with we would put up one month, the man of sin to be revealed. The second month, all the world wondered after the ... and we'd give them references in Daniel and Revelation. Then I put the dragon gave him his power, seat, and great authority. So it was a progressive Bible study on billboards that was going down California, you know. One was outside Dodger Stadium. So you know what happened, Bill? We put up the last one, said Saturday, the Sabbath of the Lord, Sunday, the mark of the beast, whom would you choose? And I always remember that I was starting to be called on the carpet. I was being accused of being critical to Catholics, and that this message was too strong, that I was insulting the Roman Catholic Church, and that I should hold my lips. But here's the truth of the matter. I'll never forget that as we're putting out these billboards, many things started to happen. One, I would get a call from the local diocese of the Roman Catholic Church wanting to meet with me for dinner or for lunch to sit and to talk. And I'll never forget, I was advised by Bob Treves at the time. He says, don't go to any appointments with them. They just want to get information. So don't go. Then I remember as we were putting up more billboards that the Adventist church was very troubled. And I learned that Rome was pressuring them. You know, these billboards, and I'm going to prove that because I have in front of me some documentation that is going to prove the way that the Adventist church was being pressured by the Catholic Church and what they did to make peace. But Bill, I'll never forget that as the Adventist church was troubled, I was receiving calls from the head elder, the pastor, and they were telling me that I need to take these billboards down. And I said, why? The Lord told me to put up these billboards as he asked me to write the Mary book. The same voice that asked me to write the Mary book in 3 million copies in 7 languages is the same voice that told me to put up these billboards, because the Protestant Reformation, where was it? And Adventism was muffled when it came to exposing the beast, and preaching straight on Revelation 13, that I felt very convicted to do this. So we put them up, and we put them up. And then I had to be called in, and I was facing disfellowshipment. Now, I was accused of starting a new movement. And they also said I wouldn't follow constituted church authority. But the main issue was always the billboards. The billboards. And they would say, oh, it's because you're running around with these independent ministries, Steps to Life and Prophecy Countdown, and there was Bob Treffs and his ministry and the printed page and all this. But, Bill, what happened was that I was called in to a special meeting, and I just want to set the record straight. I love my church. I love my church. But I just want to set the record straight, because people heard things about me, but they really never heard the full story. They never heard the truth. So I'm called in to this, it's a disfellowshipment. And they told me that I won't follow constituted church authority, and Don Snyder chaired the meeting. And then he asked if I had anything to say, and I said, sure, I do have something to say. And I asked, could you sit down, because I really want to speak on this subject a minute. And so I stood up and I took the Great Controversy and I opened up to page, I believe, 99. And it says, about this time, there arrived in Prague 2 strangers from England, men of learning who had received the light that had come to spread into distant land. And it goes on to say here, in a place open to the public, they drew 2 pictures. One representing the entrance of Christ into Jerusalem, meek and sitting upon an ass, Matthew 21:5, and followed by his disciples in travel-worn garments. The other picture portrayed a pontifical procession, the Pope arrayed in rich robes and triple crown, mounted upon a horse magnificently adorned, preceded by trumpeters and followed by cardinals and prelates in dazzling array. Here was a sermon which arrested the attention of all classes, and crowds came to gaze upon the drawings. None could fail to read the moral, and many were deeply impressed by the contrast between the meekness and humility of Christ, the Master, and the pride and the arrogance of the Pope, his professed servant. There was a great commotion in Prague, and the strangers after a time found it necessary for their own safety to depart. The pictures made a deep impression on the mind of Huss, John Huss, and led him to a closer study of Bible and of Wycliffe's writings. And what did he do? He had the Bible translated into German. So there was a billboard that showed Christ and the Pope that led to Huss seeing the light that opened up the Word of God, in German. And here I was putting up a billboard trying to reveal the light of God, that people would see that the Pope, according to Bible scripture, was the man of sin, the little horn power, the beast whose deadly wound was healed. And we progressed with more billboards and more billboards. But the Adventist church that day, when I was done, and in the middle of the sermon, as I was giving it, reading from page 99, A Great Controversy, a doctor's wife jumps up in the middle of the audience and says, I haven't heard such a powerful message in this church in the past 5 years.
Amen.
And then they voted, and I was excommunicated. But Bill, I asked you a question, and I want to read Great Controversy again before you answer this question and we begin this presentation. But it says here, instead of standing in defense of the faith once delivered to the saints,
The Protestants are now, as it were, apologizing to Rome for their uncharitable opinion of her, begging pardon for their bigotry. In this Adventist condemned Catholic bashing, this was the apology letter from the Southern California Conference representing 149 congregations to Cardinal Mahoney, who we showed covered up many priests and pedophiles and was a pedophile himself who violated my own family. So, Bill, the Adventist Church apologized and said they didn't hold in harmony to the views, of this renegade group that put up these billboards. And we've challenged that fact because the billboard said Saturday the Sabbath of the Lord and Sunday the mark of the beast, whom will you choose? But, Bill, how in the world did we get to a place that the Adventist leadership would go apologize to the man of sin, to the mother of harlots, to this whore of Bible prophecy for proclaiming the three angels' message? Can you help me understand, Bill, how did we get there in Adventism to ever come to the place to do such a thing?
Well, the Seventh-day Adventist leaders, Danny, Froome, Anderson, and Reed, they told the apostate Protestants that, oh no, we believe that atonement was finished at the cross.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, Danny, the Adventist leaders said that Jesus took upon himself the unfallen nature of Adam.
Before sin.
Before sin entered the world. So, Danny, they then, of course, they watered down the role of Ellen White in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. They watered down also, Danny, our understanding of end-time Bible prophecy. So, Danny, that began in the mid-1950s, and from that time, Danny, down to your disfellowshipment in 1993, Danny, there has been a 40-year trend in Seventh-day Adventism to water down our beliefs and to become as much like the worldly churches as we possibly can.
Very well said, Bill.
So that's why we see, Danny, what happened.
So this has been a progression of, as it were, looking not as different from other denominations, because Walter Martin was identifying us as one of the cults, along with Jehovah's Witnesses and the Mormons and Kingdom of the Cult. That this is going to really open the eyes of many of the people that are watching. So I want to begin with a statement in Review and Herald, March 22nd, 1887. We have far more to fear from within than from without. The hindrances to strength and success are far greater from the church itself than from the world. Bill, I'm not trying to pick on Neil Wilson. I'm just bringing up facts that he made a statement about our view as far as our stance against popery, the papacy. He made, and this was a sworn statement, right, Bill?
Yes, it was.
And this was actually the Mary Kay McLeod lawsuit, to give some background there. But under a sworn statement dated February 6, 1976, it says here, he made this statement. Neil Wilson, president of the North American Division of Seventh-day Adventists, gives this sworn statement in the Silver Tobler legal case involving the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Although it's true that there was a period in the life of the Seventh-day Adventist Church when the denomination took a distinctly anti-Roman Catholic viewpoint, and the term hierarchy was used in a pejorative sense to refer to the papal form of church governance, that attitude on the church's part was nothing more than a manifestation of widespread anti-popery among conservative Protestant denominations in the early part of this century and the latter part of the last, and which has now been, and here's the classic statement, right? Been assigned to the historical trash heap so far as the Seventh-day Adventist Church is concerned. Further, in the same brief, While, however, Adventist doctrine continues to teach that church government by one man is contrary to the Word of God, it's not good Seventh-day Adventism to express an aversion to Roman Catholicism as such. Do we have an anti-popery message, Bill Hughes?
You know, Neil Wilson's statement says that we based it simply on how Protestants viewed Rome in the 19th century. But Danny, in light of the three angels' messages of Revelation 14, the third angel's message, Danny, is a warning against honoring the Sunday tradition of the beast,
right,
which is Rome, which is the papal power, and her image, which are the apostate Protestant churches. So, Danny, the third angel's message is not something confined to the 19th century. The book Great Controversy, Danny, in its nearly 700-page entirety, was not a book, Danny, that was written for 19th century people. It was a scope, Danny, that looked at history from the first century
right,
and then traced the rise of the papacy in the 6th century and then ruled for 1,260 years. Right. And then, of course, looks at the final movements of Earth's history. So Neil Wilson's comment, Danny, tries to make it appear as though we're just isolating a century.
Yeah, right.
When in actuality, Danny, we're looking at a message that is to go to every nation, kindred, tongue, and people.
We had another situation here with B.B. Beach, who was the head of the Public Affairs and Religious Liberty. And on May 18, 1977, B.B. Beach, Secretary of the Northern European West African Division, had an audience with Pope Paul VI. Elder W. Duncan Eva, a vice president of the General Conference of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, reported Dr. Beach presented the Pope a medallion, which was a gold-covered symbol of the SDA Church. Dr. Beach noted that the audience with the Pope marked the first time in history that the SDA Church, through an official representative, had met with a Roman pontiff. So he gave the Pope a medal. Here we have a picture of this medal. They were very proud of this accomplishment. I was raised Roman Catholic. I'm aware of the second commandment that says, "Thou shalt not worship any graven images." And I put on this slide a picture of a statue of St. Francis of Assisi, the Virgin Mary, and of Jesus himself in like position. That's on this medal. Now, the Pope of Rome is going to say, "Thank you for the graven image." But it doesn't say anything here about the seventh-day Sabbath being Saturday and not Sunday. In fact, this does not proclaim anything, and I don't understand. Jesus doesn't land on the earth.
Right.
Right?
Right.
He doesn't land on the earth. It's a graven image, the crucifix on there, and there's a number of different things that would make this attractive to a Roman Catholic.
That's why people in Seventh-day Adventism today, Danny, need to be shaken to say, look what's going on amongst the leadership in this church, and if you can't prove what they're saying in the Bible and the writings of Ellen White, don't you dare embrace it.
Make a comment in regards to what this slide is saying.
Well, Danny, William Johnson, he was the former editor of the Adventist Review. 1994, 1995, he put an insert into the Review and Herald, and it was over Revelation chapters 12 through 17. Well, right in the heart of that, Danny, he's commenting on the beasts of Revelation chapter 13. And the first beast of Revelation 13, Danny, of course, it claims to be God on earth, claims power to forgive sins, sets up Sunday worship in the world, persecutes people, rules for 1,260 years, turns people away from the high priestly ministries of Christ in the sanctuary in heaven and points people to an earthly priesthood.
Wow.
Well, Danny, it clearly only represents the papacy.
Right, right.
Now, Bill Johnson, in commenting on this first beast, this is what he says. To interpret the sea monster, the first beast of Revelation 13, as the papacy seems somewhat out of keeping with the spirit of the times. In an age when Christianity in general faces the onslaughts of secularism, and when among Christians ecumenism has become popular, the interpretation smacks of narrowness and bigotry.
You know, when they apologized for the billboard, what did it say in Great Controversy? That they're apologizing for their bigotry. That's right. He's doing the same thing here, saying that if we take that straight stance, you know, pointing out Roman Catholicism, we could look like it's bigotry.
Mm-hmm. Danny, if once when I read that statement in the review, I went back and I looked up every reference from the writings of Ellen White where she discusses the first beast of Revelation 13. She makes, Danny, somewhere between 75 and 90 references to that first beast. I don't remember the exact amount. Danny, in every case, she identifies the first beast of Revelation 13 with the papal power.
Absolutely.
For that man to make such a statement as that, he should have been fired on the spot. He should have been given his severance pay and never been allowed in the Review and Herald offices again. Danny, that's nothing short of heresy.
Yes. You know, Bill, it just keeps building here. What does Pope Benedict XVI, Cardinal Walter Kaspar, Dr. Hans Kung, and Dr. Jan Paulson, ex-president of the General Conference of Seventh-day Adventists, have in common? And it says the University of Tübingen in Germany. The president of the General Conference is attending a theological university in Tübingen where the Pope went. And these other men here that are cardinals and educators, and Hans Kung was the professor of ecumenical theology and the director of the Institute for the Ecumenical Research at the University of Tübingen until his retirement. Cardinal Walter Kaspar was still serving as a professor of dogmatic theology and became dean of theological faculty at Tübingen the same year. Today, Cardinal Walter Kaspar is the president of the Pontifical Council for Promoting Christian Unity. Ex-Pope Benedict, formerly Joseph Ratzinger, was appointed in 1966 as professor of dogmatic theology at the University of Tübingen. And Dr. Jan Paulson was the president of the General Conference of Seventh-day Adventists, enrolled at Tübingen as a student and became the first SDA to receive a doctorate in theology for Tübingen in June 1972. A doctor of theology in ecumenical-minded university where the Pope even went? Now, I know, in fairness, there is the Protestant and there is the Catholic, but still, it's very ecumenical-minded of bringing the two together.
Absolutely.
That was showing that ever since Vatican II, we're seeing a change. We're seeing a change in small groups. We saw changes in music. We saw different changes within our own church, not just in other Protestant churches. And I'm going to show some of this here today. You have something you wanted to point out yet, Bill? You want me to show?
Go ahead, Dan.
Okay. But who is this here on Signs in the Bible Story, Bill? Who is this?
That's the man who wrote the bedtime and Bible stories, Danny, is, of course, Arthur Maxwell.
Arthur Maxwell. And here I have statements by Arthur Maxwell, and this one in particular says that he was, was he in attendance at Vatican II?
Absolutely.
And he says here, nobody will ever believe me that I sat so long, so near to His Holiness. But I had a wonderful view and I saw some fascinating close-up views. We must rethink our approach to our Roman Catholic friends. How can we reject an outstretched hand, there it is again, and be Christians? The same thing Westbury said when he went to Andrews, right? Theological seminary. And then it says, how can we say they belong to Antichrist when they reveal many beautiful Christian attitudes? So is he changing his position?
Totally.
How can you call him Antichrist? Does that shock you very much? I hope it does. I just hope it does. The outstretched hand. We had 4 brothers that went to Vatican II, did we not?
Mm-hmm.
And this is by Arthur Maxwell, Signs of the Time, that it was a sermon he gave, the outstretched hand.
Mm-hmm.
Did B.B. Beach stretch out his hand?
Sure he did.
To the Pope? Is Arthur Maxwell stretching out his hand to the Pope?
Absolutely.
Bill, in 1973, B.B. Beach co-authored a book with Lucas Vischer, Secretary of the World Council of Churches, entitled So Much in Common Between the World Council of Churches and the Seventh-day Adventists. Bill, I don't think our people realize this. I think it's the same thing. We're sending Bacchiocchi into Rome. We're sending him to the Gregoriana. And he's going to go in there as an infiltrator to Rome, when it's the exact opposite. So these 4 men are going to Vatican II thinking, oh, we're making great strides as Seventh-day Adventists. But the opposite is true. What are they doing? They're watering down their position of giving the 3 angels message, and they're becoming so close to Rome, they're partaking of a similar spirit.
Absolutely.
An ecumenical spirit.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You know, we're going to get into this BEM document now. Remember this Lucas Vischer,
yes,
who co-authored the book with B.B. Beach?
So Much in Common.
Secretary of the World Council of Churches. Mm-hmm. He left a decisive mark on the World Council of Churches and the ecumenical movement through the leadership he provided as Director of Faith and Order from 1966 to 1979. Lucas Vischer was also Professor of Ecumenical Theology at the University of Bern. He initiated and shaped various study processes, in particular the study of baptism, Eucharist, and ministry that is widely recognized as a major milestone in the history of the ecumenical movement. Baptism, Eucharist, and ministry are recognized as 3 of the key doctrinal issues that separate churches. Since its publication, the text has been translated into more than 40 languages and has been the basis of many official agreements between the churches. And here we find SDA Church signs the BEM document 1982. The Pontifical Council for Promoting Christian Unity, reported by Monsignor John Radano on the 25th anniversary of the World Council of Churches. The year 2007 marks the 25th anniversary of the publication in 1982 of the Faith and Order Convergence Text, Baptism, Eucharist, and Ministry, an ecumenical milestone. And Bill, when you look at this document, 25th anniversary printing, on the back, what does it say? Over 100 theologians met in Lima, Peru in January 1982 and recommended unanimously to transmit this agreed statement, the Lima text, for the common study and official response of the churches. They represent virtually all the major church traditions: Eastern Orthodox, Oriental Orthodox, Roman Catholic, Old Catholic, Lutheran, Anglican, Reformed, Methodist, United, Disciples, Baptist, Adventist, and Pentecostals. The church's response to this agreed statement has played a vital part in the ecumenical process of reception. Bill, what is going on? This, to me, is one of the most alarming things that I've ever seen. How can we as a Seventh-day Adventist church endorse anything about baptism when there's infant baptism and baptism by immersion, the Eucharist, the Sun wafer in the Catholic Church that literally becomes the body of Christ? Bill, how can we join hands with this theology, with this movement?
Danny, the only way that can happen is because
Seventh-day Adventism is rapidly changing and is rapidly, Danny, joining up with Romanism and apostate Protestant churches. Danny, in the ministry part of the BEM document, what was agreed upon under the ministry part of it, Danny, was that there would be no attempts at proselytizing people in other churches.
No kidding.
Now, that was the M part of the BEM document.
No proselytizing. And for those listening, that means that we're not to call anybody out. There's no Revelation 18 message to come out of her, my people,
right?
That you partake not of her sins, right?
Right.
Come out of Babylon.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Separate yourselves from your churches.
Right.
That's part of our commission.
It's the second and third angel's message, Danny. So, Danny, there's no way that a faithful Seventh-day Adventist could have signed that document. The fascinating thing, Danny, is that the Adventist representative who signed it was a man named Raoul Deteran. Raoul Deteran was a professor at Andrews University.
He was.
Yes. The fact that Raoul Deteran...
He signed this.
Yes, he signed that document on behalf of the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Was there protests within our leadership?
There was silence, Danny.
In fact, there was
silence.
a change at that time.
Danny, this became, after the BEM document was signed, the Seventh-day Adventist denomination changed the logo so that now we have 3 wavy lines.
Instead of, Bill?
Instead of the 3 angels' messages. Danny, symbols are very significant.
Mm-hmm.
These 3 angels, Danny, with trumpets, symbolized to the world that as Seventh-day Adventists, we believe that we have 3 angels' messages from Revelation 14
absolutely
to sound throughout the
Praise
world,
God.
Danny. Absolutely.
God's message, God's counter to what's going on in Revelation 13 of the beast's power.
Absolutely.
It's
Danny.
his messengers. It's his solution. It's his victory march.
Absolutely, Danny. And it's those 3 angels' messages, Danny, that distinguish and set apart a group of people as a called out people to give distinctive messages at this time in Earth's history to prepare a people for the second coming of Christ. Now, Danny, that was our symbol. That was our sign before the BEM document. After the BEM document, Danny,
it changed.
It changed, and it became those wavy lines. Again, Danny, for the National and World Council of Churches, when they see that sign, what it simply says is that the Seventh-day Adventist Church is a part of the grand ecumenical movement.
It's an important point, Bill.
For a one world church.
Bill, we should all be alarmed as Seventh-day Adventists. And it's up to the laity to stand up and to proclaim the true message.
Absolutely, Dan.
Because the leadership, I don't want to use these words, but they're selling out. Some would say they've sold out.
They've sold
This,
out.
to me, is pivotal.
It's
been a trend. It's been a process.
Absolutely. You know, again, it's Froome.
Yeah.
It's Wilson. It's Beach. It's the BEM document. It's William Johnson. Roy Adams, an associate editor of the Review, Danny. The BEM document is signed in 1982. 1991, Review and Herald, Roy Adams, he says, the Eucharist, Danny, is a part of, he uses the word ambit, of the 3 angels' messages. Now, Danny, There was nothing of protest. There was no outcry to remove that man from his position. And that was allowed in the Review and Herald. A year after that, Danny, sandwiched in between Adams and Johnson in 1995, Myron Widmer in the Adventist Review when John Paul came to Denver. Myron Widmer, Danny, said that John Paul II was preaching the gospel to the young people in Denver. And I sat back and I said, what part of the everlasting gospel was John Paul preaching in Denver? Danny, again, trend in time.
This goes to our next slide. As we see this door of mercy and this push of the year of the Jubilee by John Paul II, I found in that book by Russell and Colin Standish that something interesting was going on at a Baptist church in Huntsville. Was it Alabama, I believe?
Right.
And so here it says in this book, and you notice the pastor standing there, and this is John Dixon. From Oakwood College. Right. And it says here, where will you find a Catholic priest speaking in a Baptist church with music being performed by Seventh-day Adventists and members of a Church of Christ at the Festival of Christian Unity for the Great Jubilee service? Here's this ecumenical push, the BM document. We're seeing the Door of Mercy, Jubilee 2000, this great Jubilee taking place where Adventists, as it says, Catholics, also members of the Church of Christ, all coming together in Christian unity. In fact, it says here, the Reverend John Nixon, pastor of Oakwood College, Seventh-day Adventist Church, said he's excited about the role his denomination will play in the event. This is the first time event, and the fact that it is bringing together Catholics and Protestants is very exciting, Nixon said. What makes it so meaningful is the fact that it was initiated by the church and is not something political, such as the mayor's prayer breakfast. It doesn't have a political agenda, but a spiritual one. It is our hope that all barriers of divisiveness will be moved and we will focus on the things that unite us and draw us together. The Huntsville Times, January 2000. So, Bill, what are we seeing here? This trend, the BM document, the three wavy lines, them coming together in an ecumenical first-time outreach involving pastors of Oakwood College that I always believed was a conservative college of the Adventist Church.
Robert Falkenberg, Danny, obviously a president of the General Conference in the 1990s, and he's espousing the fact that he is very proud of the fact that he is an evangelical Seventh-day Adventist.
Evangelical Seventh-day Adventist. That sounds like an oxymoron. Doesn't it to you, Bill?
Absolutely.
And here in the Standish book as well, I find ecumenism in the bookstore. My jaw dropped when I saw that Robert Schuller, pastor of the Pentecostal Crystal Cathedral, associate speaker of the Hour of Power television broadcast, and author of the new book, Dump Your Hang-Ups, will be Thursday, August 9th, 5 to 7:30 p.m. at Potomac Adventist Book and Health Food Store. So our Potomac Conference Adventist bookstore, now the largest in the world, would promote Robert Schuller, invite him to its store, demonstrate just how entrenched the ecumenical spirit is within our midst. Bill, this thing just keeps building. The Hollywood Seventh-day Adventist Church going to have the Eucharist or the Lord's Supper, letting Roman Catholics off the hook. And this was by Lauren Seibel. And this was quite fascinating. Bill, can you summarize this?
Basically, Danny, what he's saying is that it's very similar to Neil Wilson. He's saying that what we once believed, it was right in harmony with the time.
Right.
But now we're in the 2000s. We're a much more intellectual, a much more scholarly people. So we need to re-examine some of the beliefs we've had. That was Seibel's basic premise, Danny.
Yeah, Bill, in this article, Letting Roman Catholics Off the Hook, in Adventist Today magazine, this is 2010 now. We look at the high points that this Bible is making, and it says, 1, more than 100 years have passed since our prophet approved these prophetic applications. They've changed.
They've changed.
Number 2, principles might be more diagnostic than players. Ellen White fingered Catholicism in a very different world. The Roman Catholic Church of today is much different institution than it was during Ellen White's time. So Rome has changed, according to Seibel. 5, by focusing on Roman Catholicism, we might miss more dangerous anti-Christian opponents. I wonder who those are. And then God has given us time to become a world church, and that changes the cast of characters in our eschatology. And lastly, religious liberty has arguably improved in countries where Catholicism has influence. Well, we need to give a hand to Rome. You know, this explains to me on this Great Controversy project what we find out, that they've taken the beautiful book, the Great Controversy, this masterpiece, Bill, this masterpiece, and it's been gutted, as it were, with the strong language exposing the whore, the beast, exposing the man of sin, exposing the papacy. It's been watered down, it's been gutted. They use the prophet's words yet, as they've edited it out to say that she authored this book, The Great Hope. And here you see at this website, you see the pictures of the pioneers. The book you have here is a time-tested classic of both history and prophecy, exploring what God will do in the future in light of his past interaction with humanity. The Great Hope offers cutting-edge insights for the 21st century. The author, Ellen G. White, is the most published woman of all time. She wrote 40 books, and one of them was translated into 140 different languages. So as you look at this project, and here we have Mark Finley. And in here he's saying that the understanding of Ellen G. White estate is that while the content itself is understood to have been inspired, there's no indication that the title of the book is the product of any direct inspiration. So they have the right to change the title, they're saying, but not the content. And then they make the argument that the title was changed with each of the 4 versions published, but every time in the 4, it uses the words "a great controversy," but the General Conference this time changes it to "The Great Hope" because the title isn't inspired. See how they beat around the bush here? So you find that this Great Controversy project, that they're raining millions of copies of "The Great Hope." Bill, you have in your hand the copy of this literature evangelist, and tell us a little bit about what's going on here in this picture.
Well, Danny, you have these great controversies stacked up like in a pyramidal shape. We see in this magazine the book, The Great Controversy, the classic 700 pages. Down here you have Ellen White endorsing it as the book to get out. So then, Danny, faithful Seventh-day Adventists look at this and say, oh, well, if Ellen White's behind it, I'm behind it. So I'm going to write a check to support this.
I've spoke to people who aren't happy about this. Just recently, last month, they gave a lot of money towards this project, but he never expected the book to be The Great Hope.
Right.
The Great Hope. See, Bill, even on this slide here, I'm showing the picture that you're holding up on that magazine, and I'm showing the copy of the book in that picture.
Right.
Because you can't make it out as clearly there, but you certainly can on the left. But what did they do at the dedication ceremony of the Great Controversy Project? They have this book, The Great Hope, there that they're all praying that's going to go around the world. Things are changing, Bill. In Spectrum, it says, back in the 80s, I was a church ministries director in Quebec, conference, I was alone at the office when the phone rang, and instantly startled by the tone of the voice on the other end, an angry man went on the attack. Is this the headquarters of the Seventh-day Adventist Church? I asked who he was. I'm the police commissioner of Montreal. Somewhat frazzled, I asked him the reason for his call. We've received numerous complaints about a book entitled The Great Controversy that's being placed in letterboxes in a wealthy section of the city. After some research, we have identified your church as the publisher and distributor. A quick perusal has clearly shown that the book is very anti-Catholic and thus falls in the category of hate literature because its content can easily create hatred between communities. See, they can't put out The Great Controversy. They're trying to tell us, look, it's too strong today. And as I looked at this information in Spectrum, they're talking about the book's too long. We're in a postmodern world today, that things are changing, that we've been pretty narrow-minded. And then it says, does it contain error? Adventist scholars spent quite a bit of time researching our beliefs and practices. Most of the time, the research will confirm the doctrine under scrutiny, but sometimes the scholars are led to acknowledge that added insights shed new light that calls for reevaluation of some beliefs. And look at what he says here. 3 cases in point. The sign in the sun, moons, and stars dating back some 200 years are now considered to be indicative of the nearness of the Parousia. That's our old application to the second coming of Christ. Many years have passed. Number 2, the understanding of the investigative judgment. Number 3, that it is Satan and not God that pours the 7 bowls over the wicked. The people who might choose to read the book will probably be the kind of reader that will question some of the theological material and find it wanting and reject the book altogether. This is heresy. This is outright heresy.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, Danny.
And then in Ministry Magazine, The Great Controversy Project, an interview by Delbert W. Baker. I understand the goal is to distribute 10 million of The Great Controversy. Could you discuss the overall logistics behind this distribution plan? The point is we want to distribute The Great Controversy, a spiritual book to help us spreading the Great Controversy. But Pacific Press and Review and Herald Publishing Association print The Great Hope, listing Ellen White as the author, but would the prophet supply an adapted version of her classical book, The Great Controversy, that does not include the following? Bill, this isn't the theology of the Adventist Church. Yes, we believe in the investigative judgment. Yes, we are to expose the papacy. But if you go quickly through these, the cleansing of the sanctuary message, it's missing. The second angel's call to come out of Babylon, the third angel's message on the mark of the beast, 1844 in the hour of God's judgment, the first angel's message, the investigative judgment, the identification of Babylon, the identification of the beast of Revelation 13, the little horn, Luther and the reformers, and their trials and persecutions that will be repeated, the rise of the Advent awakening of the 1840s culminating in the formation of the remnant church and the seed of the woman who keep the commandments of God. What did she say? Would you read that statement?
Sure. Publishing Ministry, page 358. I am more anxious to see a wide circulation for this book than for any others I have written. For in the Great Controversy, the last message of warning to the world is given more distinctly than in any of my other books.
Read the next paragraph.
That's Great Controversy 607. It says, the clergy will put forth almost superhuman efforts to shut away the light, lest it should shine upon their flocks. By every means at their command, they will endeavor to suppress the discussion of these vital questions.
So we see that the brethren are putting forth great effort to shut away the light when they think that they're sharing the light.
Yeah.
Bill, there's Ted Wilson, the president of our conference, going door to door. I'm sure it's to be an inspiration to get the laity and the work people in the churches to get out and disseminate these books worldwide. But Bill, would you read this?
It says, yet this is not the case with the book, The Great Hope. This book does not give the warning to the world distinctly. Have Seventh-day Adventist leaders become cunning and crafty in their approach nowadays? And clearly, Danny, the answer would have to be yes. They have not only renamed the great controversy with another title, but they have obliterated the teachings of Ellen G. White. Have church leaders done this so as to give the impression that they are preaching the three angels' messages while appeasing the conscience of the conservative brethren within the church, and yet at the same time raise millions of dollars from unsuspecting church members? And again, Danny, absolutely yes. Could the purpose of this huge expenditure of money be to convince you that the church is actually evangelizing the world with the end-time testing truth messages of Revelation 14?
Isn't that well said?
Absolutely.
Bill, I believe that's exactly what's going on. This was false advertising.
Absolutely.
When President Ted Wilson began promoting this project through satellite broadcast to the millions of church members, his sales pitch was to promote the great controversy. He never mentioned printing hundreds of millions of copies of a condensed 11-chapter abridged version to be distributed to the masses, but this is where we are today.
Absolutely.
According to the North American Division SDA website, the plan is to distribute 170 million copies of so-called Great Hope, and the NAD's website claimed that the book will shake the world. President Ted Wilson, on another occasion, when questioned about the mark of the beast at ASI, August 2014, answered, "The mark of the beast is the worship of God on any other day than the Bible's Sabbath." Is the mark of the beast the worship of God on Wednesday or Friday or any other day of the week but the seventh day? Most of the references to the beast in Revelation 13 to 20 is the papacy, is it not? And what day has it substituted for the true Sabbath? Sunday. This is the mark of her authority. This has been taught for almost 170 years in Adventism. Mm-hmm. And again, Bill, would you read this in Great Controversy 448?
Sure. The enforcement of Sunday keeping on the part of Protestant churches is an enforcement of the worship of the papacy, of the beast. Those who, understanding the claims of the fourth commandment, choose to observe the false instead of the true Sabbath are thereby paying homage to that power by which alone it is commanded. But in the very act of enforcing a religious duty by secular power, the churches would themselves form an image to the beast. Hence, the enforcement of Sunday keeping in the United States would be an enforcement of the worship of the beast and his image.
Could that be any more clear? Does that say Wednesday? Does that say Friday? Bill, that statement, was that a slip? What do you think happened in that statement that he would make a statement of that magnitude as a president of the Seventh-day Adventist Church when asked?
My take on it, Danny, is that Ted Wilson was seeking to move Seventh-day Adventism from our historical teaching on the mark of the beast and begin to move us towards unity with apostate Protestant and Catholic churches. Right.
So our sexual sins that will become a sister to the Babylonian way, is it in our church today? Bill, what are we seeing? We're seeing this gay movement has taken foothold, spiritual formation. We're leaning towards Catholicism. We're using the Eucharist. We're coming forward for communion. I've seen so many changes with my eyes. And look at Andrews Seminary, Bill. Mm-hmm. Its position, its document on homosexuality. It states it should be emphasized, however, that the biblical materials condemn homosexual practice, but there is no castigation of innate homosexual orientation per se. We strongly affirm that homosexual persons have a place in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Bill, this trend,
yeah.
You know, I think of Ellen White when she saw that train moving fast. Mm. And there were what? The people on board. Mm-hmm. our people. And she looked again, and the conductor was Satan. And it's headed to perdition. Bill, this slide, we're about done here. The dreams from his father. If we go back to the very beginning of this presentation, it was Neil Wilson, under oath, that said that our anti-popery position has been consigned to the historical trash heap. I'm afraid that Ted Wilson, it appears, is fulfilling the dreams of his father.
Absolutely, Danny. Absolutely.
Remember the words of Ted Wilson's father, ex-General Conference President Neil Wilson. Although it's true that there was a period of time in the church when the denomination took a distinctly anti-Roman Catholic viewpoint, which has now been assigned to the historical trash heap so far as Seventh-day Adventist Church is concerned. And I have here in this picture the great controversy going in the trash heap because it's been substituted with the great hoax.
With the great what?
Hoax.
That's exactly what it is, Danny.
Bill, this book, this beautiful book by Ellen White has been butchered. And I could say it has been consigned to the historical trash heap. That's our view of the past. So I have to say, I saw a movie on President Obama. He was fulfilling the dreams of his father, coming against the United States and capitalism and working towards the destruction of our Constitution and the papal power at Congress. And we're seeing so many changes today.
Totally, Danny.
So the SDA General Conference leaders with the Roman Catholic Bishop of St. Louis, a Reformed Jewish rabbi, a prominent Lutheran clergyman at the 2005 General Conference session in St. Louis, Missouri. So we're stretching the hand again, reaching out.
The Seventh-day Adventist denomination, Danny, over a trend of the last 70 years, is walking right in hand with Roman Catholicism and apostate Protestant churches. We're taught in Seventh-day Adventism today that all of this is going to go right into God's kingdom. But Danny, according to Revelation 14:8 and Revelation 14:9, coupled with Revelation 17 and 18, Roman Catholicism and apostate Protestantism suffer the plagues and the wrath of God. Now, Danny, if we are going to become a part of them, behave and teach just like them, Danny, we will receive of the plagues as they will.
So we're in a way forming an image.
Yes, we are, Danny.
You know, I want to, as we close, get to Great Controversy 566. Romanism as a system is no more in harmony with the gospel of Christ now than at any former period in our history. The Protestant churches are in great darkness, or they would discern the signs of the times. The Roman Church is far-reaching in her plans and modes of operation. She's employing every device to extend her influence and increase her power in preparation for a fierce and determined conflict to regain control of the world and to reestablish persecution and to undo all that Protestantism has done. Bill, it's a backsliding church that lessens the distance between itself and the papacy. And that picture to me, I'm saying no. Elder Wilson, no. Distance yourself.
Focusing on others' needs is what Jesus did when most of the world is focusing on their own needs. He was in constant communion with his Father. John 8:29. He every morning separated time to spend time with his Father and to get orders for the day. He said, everything I do whatever my Father tells me to do. That's what we are to do. And yet, today, the tendency is to obey man rather than God. Even within our own church, there is more a tendency today, and we graduate theology students today that learn how to obey their president. Pastors learn to obey their president, and presidents obey their presidents, and presidents obey their presidents. That is Catholicism. The Seventh-day Adventist Church never was based on obeying man, though we always fought it and there was always tendencies. But you see, the authority of the church is in the people. The authority is at the bottom. In the Catholic system, the authority is at the top. But Jesus said, it will not be so among you. Kings rule over others. But if you want to be at the top, you are the servant of all. Amen. So the Seventh-day Adventist Church was organized differently. It was organized with the authority at the bottom, where the church board has the authority, not the pastor, not the president. The authority is in the church board. Amen. We're committee driven from the bottom up. That's why when we have our general conference session every 5 years, there's delegates from all over the world, and they tell the leaders what to do. They elect the leaders that will lead the general conference and the divisions, which are divisions of the general conference. The authority is in the people. And it goes all the way to the bottom of the church board, where the church board elects and the church representatives elect their leaders. It's true that God organized this church for work, organized the church for service. But the people who lead our church are elected servants to serve those that elected them. Not to tell them what to do. We need to get this straight. Pastors and leaders, you are the servants of the people, and they will tell you what to do. Amen. Only the Roman system is the upside down one. And yet the whole world is going that way. And authorities is being centralized politically and religiously, so that a few people will control the whole world. But there is a group of people that obey and take their orders from the commander-in-chief. There will be a group of people sealed by the Holy Spirit that will take their orders directly from God. So, conference presidents, pastors, this is a message for you as well. The message is God is taking the reins of control into His own hands. Amen. Let Him work. Amen. We are living at the end of time. And God is not going to wait anymore on men to try to do His will. He Himself is going to direct His work. And I would like to suggest to you that Satan is doing the same thing. Satan is not going to allow men to run his work anymore. He himself is taking the reins of control of his people. We need to avoid the obedience to human authority, unless it's in harmony with God's authority, and begin to spend time with our Heavenly Father like Jesus did. Amen. Whatever He tells you to do, do it. Like Jesus' mother said to the disciples. We're out of wine for the wedding. What does that have to do with me, Jesus said. And his mother said, whatever He tells you to do, do it. Mothers have a way of knowing what to do, right? And so Jesus did exactly that. He ordered them to draw water out of the well and said, serve it to the guests. And when we go to Jesus for orders and follow His commands, the church will have great success in carrying out its mission. It's as we submit to human authority that we have problems. You need to understand that clearly. You will only be saved if ultimately God has total control of your decisions. If you surrender your will to God. Therefore, we have a great conflict before us today, because men's ways of working and God's ways of working are totally different. And what we need today is humble leaders who also are under God's control, who serve as leaders as God orders them to serve the sheep below them that are under their care. All we have to do is use the right hand of the gospel appropriately, like Jesus did, and we will find that it will open doors. But instead of doing, by the way, how much did Jesus charge to heal somebody? How much did the disciples charge to heal somebody? We have drifted a long way. We have made big business out of healthcare. Our Adventist hospitals are not for the poor. That's why we're losing all our Adventist hospitals. One by one, most of them are becoming Catholic hospitals as we sell them off. They might as well. If they're not going to do it Christ's way, we don't need Adventist hospitals. We do not need big business in the Adventist church. We need big mission. If it's business as usual, that belongs outside of the church. The church is not made to be a business machine. And yet, the Seventh-day Adventist Church health system, Adventist health system, pays the highest salaries of any health system in North America. Our top CEOs earn much, much more money than any of the health systems in the whole North America. We have drifted to the point where we actually do more business than even the world does. We have beat them at their own game, and that's why God's blessing has been removed from our health work. The Adventist, that largest Adventist hospital in Australia, Sydney Adventist Hospital, the nurses are not allowed to pray with the patients. Some years ago, it was only the chaplain that was allowed. But last time I went to Sydney, they have mentioned that even the chaplain has said he will not pray with the patients because he doesn't want to influence them. But you know what? We are rapidly going beyond the point of return. And God is calling us to return. It's not that He wants us to continue the way we're going. He's begging us to come back to the form of ministry that He used. Care for the poor, care for the needy, care for the rich as well. Jesus always cared for both sides with no prejudice. It wasn't that Jesus chose to hang out with the poor, but the rich didn't want Him around. And we think we are rich and increased with goods and have need of nothing. That's why we don't want Jesus around today. I was in Puerto Rico some months ago, and a lady told me about a dream that she had. She saw a very, very large building in her dream, a round building, and it was immense with thousands of doors on the outside. Each of the doors had a gold frame. It was a beautiful building. And then she became aware that that was the worldwide Seventh-day Adventist Church, and that each door was a congregation. So she said, "This is my church. I'm going to go in and worship." So she started knocking on doors, and they wouldn't open. Finally, one door opened. And she says, "I'm a Seventh-day Adventist. Can I come into my church?" He looked at her and said, "Do you have any tithes and offerings to bring in?" She goes, "I used to have a job. I don't have a job anymore. So right now, I don't even have an income." "Oh, we don't need people like you," he said, and shut the door. And she was out. This is a dream, mind you. And she was outside feeling so hurt, and she started to cry. "My own church won't let me in." And while she was sitting there crying, another man approached, and she looked up, and he was dressed in a robe. And as he got closer, she noticed he had big scars in his hands, big black scars. And he said, "Don't worry. I've been knocking on these doors for years. They won't let me in either." What does that tell us? Maybe people like Jesus aren't too comfortable in our church today, and we don't want Him in. Because He doesn't work like we do. He doesn't think like we do. Or is it time for us to think like He does? Amen. Is it time to repent and begin to work like He does and invite Him in? Because a church that is rich and increased with goods and has need of nothing doesn't need Jesus Christ. Jesus doesn't do big business. He might heal people for free and we won't have any income. Jesus loved the faithful members of the church, but He also loved the rejected, the punished, and the disfellowshipped ones too. Jesus had no prejudices. I have been to parts of the world where very, very many people have been disfellowshipped for slight little issues that have nothing to do with sin. In one country of South America, where I went recently, entire congregations have been disfellowshipped. And the issue is administrative sin. They disobeyed the pastor. They didn't apostatize from truth. They just didn't believe that the pastor had the supreme authority. And they were disfellowshipped. In that same country, another family was disfellowshipped because a visitor came one time that was not authorized, and they gave him a bed to sleep in, and they were disfellowshipped for that. I think Jesus would have a very different way of looking at things. I have come to believe that disfellowshipping today, except for biblical reasons of spiritual apostasy and sin, is being used as a punishment, a tool of punishment. Jesus today would be hanging out with those people. 2 weeks ago, for the first time in 10 years, I was able to accept an invitation at one of those inappropriate churches where the whole entire congregation was erased, disfellowshipped, years ago. They've been inviting me for years. I never could work it out. And I was also careful some years ago to be careful where I went. They rented a hall and it was packed. There was no room hardly to sit. People are anxious to find out, how do I get ready for Jesus' coming? But somebody said, we saw there were some reformists there. We saw there was some dissidents there. We saw, you know what? That's exactly where Jesus would hang out today. Jesus loved to touch the lepers. Jesus has a people. He has a people who have the faith of Jesus, keep the commandments of God and have the faith of Jesus. He has a people. They claim to. They have the three angels' messages. They have the health message. They are His people. They worship on His day. And He loves them dearly. And He wants to prepare them for what is about to happen and what is already beginning to happen on earth. But how can He prepare us if we don't let Him speak to us? Because we don't open the pulpits to that message. We don't open the pulpits to those that preach a wake-up call message. And so, I'm talking in general terms, not, I'm going to be speaking in a church up north here in a couple of weeks. And yesterday, they just wanted the pastor asked for a couple letters of recommendation. So I sent one from here and one from my home church, South America. And I sent them the letters because they want to know, maybe they don't know me personally, they want to make sure that, but it was interesting, they come back and said, we just want you to know that we heard that you were, in quotes, almost banned in North America. And I said, that's an interesting term, almost banned. That means yes or no. What is it? Is it the aviation work that we do that bans us? Is it the orphanages that we have that cause us to be banned? Is it the thousands of people that are brought into the Adventist church every year through the television ministry that cause us to be banned? No. It's the messages. It's not the fruits. The fruits are good. The fruits are good. And you can know a tree by its fruit. So if the fruit is good, Jesus said, the tree is good. Would you agree? Yes. So why would you chop down a good tree? Wrong garden. But good trees are being chopped down everywhere. While there's trees that have very, very bad fruit that are not chopped down. So we have a problem in the church. Satan is attacking God's people today because he knows God has a special mission for them. They know what they're supposed to do. They know the truth. But if they don't do it, who else is God supposed to go to? And I would like to suggest that maybe God will go to our neighbors at Tennessee Temple. Maybe God will go to our neighbors at Covenant College. Maybe God will go to BBN to find a radio station that will finally have good music.
Amen. Amen.
Because, brothers and sisters, there is a judgment happening right now. It began in 1844. And it started with Adam and Eve. And before Jesus will come, it will pass to the living, and it will begin. The judgment must begin with the house of God. Amen. We know when the Sunday law comes, the time has already come. But I propose to you that the biggest danger we have today in the Adventist church is that our name is going to come before the judgment seat and we won't even know it. As in the days of Noah shall be in the days of the coming of the Son of Man. They were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, and they didn't know anything until the waters came and took them away. The biggest danger for Seventh-day Adventists today, God's precious commandment-keeping people, the greatest danger is that they will be eating and drinking and they won't even know that the door is already closed. The door is about to close to Seventh-day Adventists today. That door is going to close very soon. So when the Sunday law comes, it is already too late to prepare. The world is already ready. The United States is ready. The Pope is ready. Everything is ready except God's people. So the angels are desperately holding the winds, and God is desperately intervening, Jesus, as they're trying to purify His people, because when that door closes, it is too late to get ready. You waiting for the Sunday law? You better be inside before the Sunday law starts. On 9/10 of 2001, I was in Atlanta speaking for the Southern Union to the Adventist Legal Association. I told them someday something will happen in this country that will change the entire history, and it will be much more difficult to work. Little did I know that the next day the Twin Towers would fall. I could be speaking here today, and tomorrow the Sunday law could begin. Something is happening right now, and our life, eternal destiny is about to be determined. And where does it start? It starts with the elders in the church. And it goes down to the members. And I am watching some of our leaders, and I can't even imagine a Seventh-day Adventist doing some of the things that are happening. I can imagine some such many times hostile treatments that a Christian would treat somebody else that way. I can't even imagine. I know there's godly people. I'm very good friends of many godly leaders at the General Conference and at divisions and at unions. But you know what? They're not all that way. And something is happening. There's a hardening of the heart that is happening. 30 million of our brothers and sisters were tortured and murdered during the Middle Ages by the Roman power. And we go and shake hands and hug the beast? Excuse me? It is time to protest. If you're a Protestant, stand up and protest. I raise my voice because I will not do that, and I cannot believe a Seventh-day Adventist would do that. Well, they don't. Whoever does that is not a Seventh-day Adventist. I'm sorry. I don't care if they were elected to put there, they are not Seventh-day Adventist. There was a TV show, will the real so-and-so please stand up? Well, the question is, will the real Seventh-day Adventist please stand up? You know what? They're few and far between. Did you know Satan has a bride too, not just Jesus? Satan has a bride. And its headquarters is in Rome. And if you hang out with a prostitute, you have an illegitimate relationship. And when our leaders hang out with a great prostitute, there is adultery going on. They say they are Jews, but they're not. In the message to Philadelphia, it says, I know that among you are the synagogue of Satan. They say they are Jews, but they are not. They do lie. And I propose to you, we got a lot of fake Seventh-day Adventists in our church today. If you sleep and you allow them to control your conscience, you will be lost. Because they're not going to be saved. And many of them, by the way they're acting, I can only assume that maybe the Holy Spirit has been withdrawn from some of them. And very soon it'll be our turn. Daily, we must make sure that we are clothed with the white robe of righteousness and that God is eliminating all worldliness from our souls. Amen. I can't even imagine how painful it will be for Jesus to shut that door and know that the vast majority of Seventh-day Adventists are on the outside. But he is going to shut it. And it's going to happen soon. Please give Jesus his dream. Please go to him and allow him to prepare you. That is his dream come true. Make his dream come true. Place yourself and your family. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Amen. We believe in the priesthood of the believer. You know what the priesthood of the believer means? You have access directly to God. You don't need a pastor or a priest to intercede for you. Amen. You have access directly to God. And there's two founding principles of Protestantism. Everything must be based on the Bible, and there is not an authority, king, person, priest, pope, or pastor, or president that has the authority to intervene between you and your God. Amen. Two founding pillars of Protestantism. And most Protestants today are Baptist brethren. I appeal to you, if you hear this thing and you're a Baptist, go back to your roots and find out what it means to be a Protestant. If you're a Methodist, if you're a Protestant of any denomination, find out what it means to protest. And if you're a Seventh-day Adventist, I ask you today, are you really a Protestant or not? Amen. We just read this morning in the first page of our bulletin, these things have gone too far, says Sister White, as they should without someone protesting against them in plain words. Well, I would like to say today, I am a Protestant and I protest. Amen. I will not keep silent when our leadership, many of them, are committing adultery. I'm sorry, not this church, not this person. I protest. Amen. The second thing that was changed by the General Conference was the authority of the Spirit of prophecy. It used to say that the Spirit of prophecy was a source of truth. What does truth mean? It means it comes from God. If a message is from God, it is a source of truth, always, because God is truth. We took the word out, a source of truth. The Spirit of prophecy can be used to inspire you, to encourage you, but don't quote it, please. Because it is no longer believed by the official Seventh-day Adventist Church to be a source of truth. As the no authority, as the imminent coming is no longer imminent.
What do we see here on the screen? What is the outcome of this annual council? Headline says October 11th, 2017, women's ordination what? Lost again today. Skip one down. In a shocking vote, Hillary, a document
outlining punishment for the leaders of institutions that are deemed out of compliance with church policy was referred back to the Unity in Mission Oversight Committee that recommended it.
Last sentence.
It was essentially a vote to do nothing until next year's annual council.
And of course, what are they doing? These leaders of the church? They are kicking the proverbial can down the road until next year.
Annual council in
October. But there is, as the saying goes, there is a proverbial elephant in the room. So while they're talking about should we ordain women as pastors, what is the real elephant in the, what is the real controversy, Hillary?
Well, that issue can never be resolved
Until
until
what?
they deal with the women that are being ordained as elders in the church. That has not been challenged or addressed.
You know, friends, if we look at this on the screen, the first sentence says, Elder Ted Wilson came to the microphone to remind the San Antonio delegates that the vote did not disallow women's commissioning or ordaining women as local elders. Why are we still allowing women to be ordained or even to become elders, much more to ordain them as elders? And nobody is challenging that. The real issue is this: since both groups, the proponents of women's ordination and the opponents of women's ordination, both believe in women's ordination.
Right.
Women becoming elders and being ordained as, they both believe the same thing.
That's right.
What's the issue? Who has authority
to
ordain them? Look at this. Does anyone know when it came into existence? This is the North American division of Seventh-day Adventists. Read that first, Hillary. Blue words.
Neither does today's vote change the current GC policy
In
on
what
the
year?
that was 2015.
Come on. Neither does.
Neither does today's vote 2015 change the current GC policy on the ordination of women as local church elders, as stated in the 2009 Seventh-day Adventist Minister's Handbook, page 94. Elders and deacons should be persons, listen to the gender inclusivity, persons of experience chosen wisely by action of the Annual Council of 1975, reaffirmed at the 1984 Annual Council.
That whom?
Both men and women are eligible to serve as elders and receive ordination to this position of service in the church.
Is that biblical?
No.
Is that biblical? A woman being called, being placed as an elder, is that biblical?
No.
And the question is, where is Martin Luther?
Right.
Because in the context of October 31st, 2017, when Luther began to rekindle the Reformation, Martin Luther was addressing the church that they should change voted policies and practices that were unbiblical.
Right, because it put the visible church
above the Word of God, Hillary. Now, there are many issues voted by the General Conference that are unbiblical. Since this is a hot button topic, where is Martin? That's why we're saying this is a challenge to whom? The General Conference leaders. That they must overturn this unbiblical practice of ordaining, before that, installing a woman as an elder and then ordaining a woman as an elder.
Right.
It's unbiblical.
It's unbiblical. And as you mentioned, placing women as elders and how both the opponents and proponents do support women's ordination, or women in ministry serving as pastors and elders, whether ordained or not, because the GC leaders, they support women being commissioned. There's no uproar about that.
No.
So in other words, you can be a pastor, just not ordained. So that it's just contradictory.
And that's why Christ says in Matthew 15 and verse number 9, that they were teaching for doctrines, what?
The commandments of men.
These were the church now.
Right.
Whose commandments?
Commandments of men.
And verse number 3 of Matthew 15, he says, that you have transgressed, you have made void the commandments of God by your tradition. This is unbiblical.
Right.
A man-made tradition. It came from Babylon. And nobody's saying anything on this point.
Right.
It's all about the proponents and the opponents. But the elephant in the room is this: is installing a woman as an elder biblical? If it's unbiblical, we must
protest it.
But where is the voice of protest? Where is the modern day Luthers?
Well, and also, as we were talking before, you mentioned something important, that it should even start when women are enrolling in the theological department in college.
The seminaries.
You know, they're going in the seminaries with the expectation to go into pastoral ministries.
Exactly.
Why are they being led to continue in that tract of education, you know, so that they can eventually become a pastor? They should be stopped right there.
And educated. Yes, if you want to come and do Bible studies here, you may. But you are this denomination, based on Scripture, is not going to install you as an elder, nor as a pastor. It's not biblical.
And this
don't allow the young woman to take out student loans, go into excessive financial debt with the idea that they will become pastors, and then when they graduate, you tell them you can't become a pastor?
Right.
There has to be a reformation, a change, a reorganization.
Amen. And this just opens the doorway for the LGBT movement as well. Because what if someone of that orientation goes to study pastoral ministry, and then they come out and eventually they also want to become a pastor as well?
Friends, we're going to say this. As we transition, how many of you know who Ganoon Diop is? Who is he? He is the religious liberty head of the World Church, or Seventh-day Adventist. A few days ago, a person sent me a video. It's right here on the screen. Let's pass this. On the screen, this is Ganoon Diop, and he's in an interview, September 25th, 2017. The video here was posted on YouTube. Now, the video itself, as you can see here, it's in French. I don't speak French. So I had Joseph and Ralph, team members here at Safe to Serve, to translate this video and to give us the insights of what is, as you can see, make sure you're on the screen now. Look what's happening here. All right? At this time, I'm going to have Joseph and Ralph to give us some quick feedback, what they analyze from this video. Joseph, Ralph, thank you for joining us here on this Thursday evening for this study. Very, very important as we're seeing modern revivals, the false revival. And of course, the false revival is also when we see professed Seventh-day Adventists who are called to be true Protestants now, to continue the protest from John Wycliffe, Martin Luther, but now we are up in arms, may I say, in bed with modern day Jezebel. We are committing spiritual adultery on Christ Jesus, and somebody has to say something. So speak to us. As you looked at the video, what was your takeaway?
As you said, Pastor, a few days ago, Ganoon Diop went to Martinique, and there he was supposed to tell to the world the true mission of the Seventh-day Adventists, because he went in the context of the 500 years of the Protestant reform.
Mm-hmm.
The night before, he went to a big news channel where a lady asked him to speak on religion. Instead of to tell to the world what the Bible says about religion, he said we have to take this occasion to push coexistence between religion, which is in harmony with the agenda of the Pope, where he says that we have to be in one accord.
Yes.
But Paul said clearly in 2 Corinthians 6, there can be no
fellowship,
no
communion
between believers and unbelievers. And our pioneers, Ellen White says in GC page 45 verse 3, the next slide, in GC page 45 verse 3, Ellen White mentioned this. He says to secure peace and unity, they were ready as he was ready to make any concession consistent with fidelity to God. But they felt that even peace, he said, peaceful coexistence.
Yes.
Peace would be too dearly purchased at the sacrifice of principle.
Mercy.
But Ellen White says, if unity could be secured only by the compromise of truth and righteousness, let there be difference, even war.
Wow, of course. Brother, that scripture in 2 Corinthians 6, verse 14 through verse 18, is a nail in a sure place.
It is.
There can be no coexistence with true faithful Seventh-day Adventists, Bible-believing Christians, with apostate Protestants and the Pope of Rome. No.
Verse 18 is the same idea with Revelation 18 verse 4.
Amen. Come out from among them.
Come. And also what we see in what happened with Ganun Diop. Ganun Diop, like Joseph says, he is a preacher. He was supposed to proclaim the three angels' message because he had an opportunity. He was on a prominent platform in Martinique. Instead of proclaiming the truth, he was proclaiming coexistence. And it's a spiritual term in itself. It's spiritualism, and it's against our faith. And Ganun Diop also, what he did, he was promoting the pillars of the United Nations.
Yes.
Instead of promoting the pillars of our faith, which based on Great Controversy, page 409, which is Daniel 8, verse 14, he was promoting the pillars of the United Nations, which he says the first one is peace and security.
On the screen?
Yes, it's right here on the screen. Peace and security. And 2 Thessalonians 5, 1 Thessalonians 5, rather, verse 3, it says, those who are proclaim peace and safety, a sudden destruction will come upon them. So this is not what we're supposed to uphold now. And
Hold on.
Yes.
That needs emphasis.
Of course.
So instead of proclaiming the pillars
of
Seventh-day Adventism,
of course,
of Bible Christianity, you got the opportunity on a major news network. And what was he proclaiming?
The pillars of the world of the United Nations, unfortunately.
And what are they?
On the pillars of peace.
The three angels?
Oh, no, never.
The Sabbath?
Peace and security.
The sanctuary message?
Never.
And these are the nations that are going to oppress or, restrict religious liberty.
And now, next, they're going to say those who are protesting now, they're going to call them offshoot. And they don't understand that it's because they're not preaching present truth. That's why the union, the true unity, cannot be happened among the flock. So he was not upholding the sanctuary message, nor the commandments of Jesus Christ, nor the 2300 days prophecy, nor the faith of Jesus. Instead of that, he was promoting the pillars of the world.
Wow. In the minute mark, 4 minutes and 40 seconds, the interviewer asked him this question: where is the limit? Where is the difference between religion and traditions? This is the answer. He said it is extremely complex. And he sounded very troubled. Because in fact, they go together. When I saw that, my mind went to Mark chapter 7, verse 6 to 8. Christ says, hypocrites. These people honor me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. Howbeit in vain do they worship me, teaching for doctrine the commandments of men. For laying aside the commandments of God, you hold the tradition of men. We see that he upholded the tradition of men. And the next slide, he said something very important. He said, but we must try to educate people to understand that in every religion, there'll be things that are fundamentally good. But we must continue to communicate despite the difference, and we must do it with dignity. But I have a message for Ganundia. On the next slide, God said something. The same way that Christ was sent by his Father to preach a princely message. Ellen White says in the next slide, he said, God does not send messenger to flatter the sinner, He delivers no message of peace to lull the unsanctified in fallow security. He lays heavy burdens upon the conscience of the wrongdoer and pierces the soul with arrows of conviction. I truly believe this was supposed to be his mission on that platform.
Yes.
But instead of following the word of God, he went behind and killed Jesus Christ again afresh.
Unfortunately. And this statement is important. It's from Desire of Ages, page 104. And Ganun Diop is on a mission. I believe that. He's on a mission. The reason why I'm saying that, before he went to Martinique, he was in Florida. He was in a meeting from August 22nd to August 24th. And he was promoting the same thing. That was the 8th Congress for religious liberty. And he was not by himself. Who was he with? He was with Ted Wilson, the president of the General Conference. Ted Wilson was there with him, promoting the coexist. And this week, if we had a chance to tell you more about this, you will find more about this subject. They were in Florida together, promoting coexistence, peaceful coexistence. It's the key word. This is what they are promoting together.
With whom?
There were some officials, other officials of Seventh-day Adventists, people from Europe, people from Asia, all over the world. People were coming.
Catholics,
Buddhists, all those people. They were all together. They came to promote peaceful coexistence, unfortunately. And
I think I had that slide. Okay, let's go right here. Here it is. This is the interviewer, right?
Yes.
And she says, how have your conferences been received in the rest of the world, right?
Yep.
Yes.
And what did he say?
He said,
we just had a conference in Florida with about 600 participants from all over the world. Precisely, the term was religious freedom.
Listen to
and
that.
The Pope and the hope of peaceful coexistence. There were Buddhists, Catholics, Adventists, Baptists, all kind of Christian personalities, and the goal was to speak together.